You're listening to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast, home of the 2-hour deep dive interview with gold, platinum, and multi-platinum bands, including Stained, Blue Rodeo, The Arkells, Finger 11, Big Wreck, Moist, Bedouin Soundclash, I Mother Earth, Ill Scarlet, Neverending White Lights, Thornley, and many more. Please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, as well as share, comment, and like. Now let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the podcast. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We are joined by a very special guest. He's achieved a level of mastery as the guitarist for the band Clarknova, and he's gone on to become one of the most sought-after front-of-house sound techs and tour managers in the industry, working with amazing bands like Finger 11, I Mother Earth, Platinum Blonde, April Wine, JJ Wild, Big Sugar. I could go on, but we got to get this interview started. So welcome to the podcast, Dan Preston. Dan, how are you? And how good does it feel to be home for a couple weeks after a lengthy globetrotting tour?
Yeah, it feels good. Thanks for having me on, by the way. I've been loving all the podcasts. Like as I mentioned before, we got going, especially the guys that I've worked with. It's neat to see all the innards of where they came to be and all that. So, yeah, very, very cool. It's lovely to be home. I can tell you, it's just, I don't get homesick too much on the road, but this one was it's almost 2 full months out in the road, right? So I was really wanting to get home, especially being summertime, right? So I've been lucky. A lot of my tours in the past have been like fall and early spring, right? And I've been just do the festival thing during the summer. So it's nice to be home for a few weeks now. Get to enjoy the August and then get ready for some more fall touring.
Was this tour, was it more difficult than usual because of the pandemic, where maybe you had, I don't know, a year off of doing concerts? Did you have to kind of build your stamina back up for being on the road?
Yeah, big time. I'd say even more so back in the spring, like when Big Wreck really started going out again a lot, right? Like it was just like almost like a culture shock again. It's like, man, I really got to get used to this again, right? I got into this little regimen at home, which I, over the pandemic, playing a ton of guitar and working day job, because we couldn't do anything else. So luckily found some work through Music Pro and Barry doing some installs. And like I said, playing a ton of guitar, which was amazing to get back into that. Because I haven't had time over many years to sit and play and do a bit of writing and progress, and I love the instrument dearly. So that was good. But yeah, getting back into this tour specifically, I felt like it was ready. I think the hardest thing about this one, like with JJ Wild, she's and the band are, just on that upward trajectory, right? Sorry. And, so I'm the only crew member right now. And so that really widens out, it's a lot of work, some TMing, doing front of house, setting up all their monitors, working with management, doing all their logistics and ground travel stuff and budgeting and that, right? So that was the big thing for this, more the office work, let alone like the groundwork. The groundwork's kind of like, it's like second nature at this point, but it was just all that office work, all the paperwork, and that. I'm just like, okay, I got to get my head back around this again. So, and that takes a little bit of work at home, a little bit of work on the road. Like, they're going out and seeing the Eiffel Tower, and I'm doing accounting at the Airbnb, right?
Yeah,
so,
not all things are equal.
Yeah, totally. But I had a great time. The band's great. They're really putting their all into it, and I see that and I feel it back, and we're having a good time, right? So it's cool being out with them right now for sure.
I think I saw you post since you've been back. You went to that big Motley Crue show. It was like a quadruple bill: Motley Crue, Poison, Joan Jett, one more, Def Leppard. How can I forget? How was that show? I saw Motley Crue in Montreal. I think it was the Heavy MTL Festival, like over a decade ago. And they put on a great show. And unfortunately, is it Mick Mars, the guitarist?
Yeah.
I don't know if he's still on their guitarist on tour, but even back a decade ago, he was like completely bent over. He has health issues with his back. So I don't know if it's like that now.
Mick's still there, and he's rocking. He's like my favorite member. Like, when I was a kid, I was like, oh, Nikki Sixx, Tommy Lee, right? They're like the cool guys, and and in the spotlight and stuff. And Mick is like the workhorse, like true, like mega musician of that band. Like he's a great player, and he's tough as nails. All the other guys look like the tough guys, but Mick is the toughest. He had, I forget what it's called, but it's that spine issue where it's all his vertebrae are all fusing and basically becoming like cement. You know, all the liquids become cement over time. Read that in the book, the Dirt, and it's just like, holy crap! Like what the guy endured, like life on the road. You know, tour buses, planes, and uncomfortable positions, and he got through and didn't miss a show ever. You know, he's yeah, he's still there and still rocking. They put on a great show. You know, it was a lot of fun. Never thought I'd see Motley Crue again because it was 8 years ago or so. They did the big farewell thing, right? You know, like every other rock band, they go and miss it, and then they come back, and you know. But it was a really good show. Def Leppard absolutely slayed. They're such a pro band. It's crazy. Poison was great too. Joan Jett was rocking. Yeah, it was a really, really fun show. It's neat for me to go. So I don't go to a lot of shows. Number one, I'm just touring a lot.
It's probably the last thing you want to do, being at a concert every night and then,
Yeah,
your day off, you go to a concert.
in a way, yeah. And it's like it's kind of like at home. Like I listen to music, but it's not like I don't have constant music on all the time because I just give my ears that break, right? You know, and get in the car and throw on one of my favorite records or something. But yeah, normally I just want to kind of sit back and relax a little bit. But it's really cool, especially a show like that. Like that's not just a show; that's a spectacle. It was like 43,000 people packing the Sky Dome. Sorry, Sky Dome. I'm old. I guess I call it Sky.
The old school name. Yeah, I still the arena here in Ottawa since I moved back. I just call it the Ottawa Senators Arena because it's the Palladium and the Corel Center and the I don't know Canadian Tire Center now. I think.
Yeah, it'll always be Sky Dome to me. So it's but yeah, it was really cool to go see that. You know, I'm glad I went. Yeah,
Did they do anything cool with Tommy Lee's drum kit?
it was pretty standard with the double headline thing, right? And they're only 90-minute sets, right? For Def Leppard and Motley Crue. So they just did pretty standard stuff. A lot of the pyro and lasers and all that stuff too. It's just not the big rolling drum kit that we're all used to seeing.
The drums didn't go up over the crowd or anything.
No high fives at the 500 level or anything like it was back in '92 there or whatever. And so they did not on the Dr. Feelgood tour. I was there and it just came right up over the audience and right into the nosebleeds, right? So they suddenly had like the best seats in the house, right? So that must have been a cool thing for those people for sure.
That's awesome. I always like to start the interviews by sharing with our listeners how the guests and I know each other. So it just shows kind of the importance of networking, of building community, of fostering relationships. So in our case, it's as I was interviewing bands that you had done sound for, the interviews would keep coming to you. I probably would tag the members so it would show up on your feed because we are mutual friends with those band members. So, there was I Mother Earth and you worked with them. There was Finger 11, two different members. You worked with them. Recently, I had Sekou from Big Wreck. You worked with them. So that's how we know each other. So we ended up in touch and you mentioned that, hey, I'd love to sit down and talk about all the different bands I've worked with, Clarknova, the successful band that you were a part of as well. And give our listeners for once behind the scenes look of what goes on at concerts. It's not like a band just shows up and somehow the equipment is all there and everyone sounds and looks perfect. There's a whole crew. And I think this will be good for our listeners to get that behind the scenes look.
That's exactly why I wanted to do it, right? It's just to give that other side of things, right? More the tech side, because like as much as musicians and music lovers are going to watch and listen to your podcast, right? There might be some because if there are musicians at the moment making that little hop into being a technician, right? And can kind of give some insight into that alleyway versus doing the whole musician thing, right? And there's other options that you can do, which is the one that I ended up going on, right? So yeah, it's very cool.
You're here as an ambassador to all the sound techs in the world.
Yes, I am.
You got to represent. So I like to, with this deep dive, we have 2 hours, we have a ton of time, or at least it feels like a ton of time until it's done and it just flew by and we didn't cover half of what we wanted to cover. But I like to go all the way back to the beginning. So you didn't start as a sound tech or a tour manager. You didn't start as a member of a successful band like Clarknova. We go all the way to the beginning. Do you have an earliest musical memory? When did music jump out as something special for you?
I was thinking about this the other day because I knew type of question would come up, and I did dig deep. But I think my first musical memory was about 3 years old, and parents were early 30s still, so like to have a good time up late still, partying a little bit. And I remember the drum intro for "We Will Rock You" by Queen just absolutely blazed like on 11, right? So whatever time in the middle of the night it was, 2 a.m. I'm 3 years old in my
You could
bed,
feel it through the walls, probably.
right, right, and then the vocal, and I think not just my intro to rock and my first musical memory, but that was, I think, my first, realization of what guitar was. Even, Brian May comes in with it, and it's such a huge, guitar line, right? So I remember just going, wow, I remember that in my little, half awake kind of thing. It's like, wow, that sounds really cool kind of thing. And then, yeah. And then from there, it kind of started, progressing out into even at that early age, right?
Can you remember some of the other music that your parents would play around the house? So you had Queen.
Yeah, it's a Queen for sure. It's funny enough, a band I ended up working with, April Wine. I remember April Wine getting spun a lot, because that was in their heyday. They were kicking it. Kiss, of course. Boston, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin. It's funny. Like I didn't hear a lot of Sabbath, which it's because and that was ended up being like one of my favorite '70s bands of all time and ongoing, of course. But yeah, don't remember a lot of that. But just that rock, the hard rock music, right? And there was a little bit of the pop around, but I knew I didn't like it. Early '80s and stuff. And my sister listened to like some pop music, and Duran Duran was coming out, Michael Jackson, all that stuff. I actually liked Michael Jackson a little bit, but it was just like I knew right away. It's like, no, I like rock and roll.
So the guitar in the Queen song stood out to you, or caught your ear, caught your attention. But when did you gravitate towards actually playing guitar, becoming
Uh,
a musician yourself instead of just someone that enjoys hearing it?
yeah, it's probably when I decided I wanted to play. I think it was 8 or 9, and it's when I was listening to the Dire Madman record my brother had, that Aussie record, the second one with Randy Rhoads. And listening to that through and looking at the album cover, and it's actually, I think Randy Rhoads had just been killed in that plane accident. My brother told me, he's like, that guy just died, and I was just listening through, and I was like, that's it. I need to play guitar, right? And just listen to that whole album through and through.
Like
Um,
Crazy Train, it's probably the first one that.
so actually, I heard "Die of a Madman" first.
Okay, so Blizzard of Oz is the first one with
First one
Crazy Train.
so I didn't even know that existed. I maybe had heard it on the radio, just in passing when I was a kid, but like, I didn't get into the record, right? Because at that time it was more like just the older school stuff, like '70s stuff, right? And then Van Halen was coming out, and I was listening to Van Halen more, right? So and then I heard "Die of a Madman," and I was just like, that's it. I'm gonna play guitar, and then my buddy ended up having Blizzard of Oz across the road, and he was interested in playing guitar. He ended up getting one, and then I was about 6 months later, and I got one too, and then we were just nuts on
Did
Aussie.
we just become best friends? The two of you guys just rocking out.
For that, yeah, it was like our neighborhood. The two brothers, James and John Moses, across the road, and then me and my brother, just like we were already buddies for a few years already. We had lived there, but then we really got on the guitar train there, and just have at it, and that's everything changed. Probably, I think it was 10, 11 when I finally got a guitar for Christmas, right? And yeah, we were just off to the races then, that's for sure.
And did you ever take lessons or did you learn by yourself? I mean, the other day you posted like an 18-second video of you getting up in the middle of the night, you got a brand new guitar, you're shredding like crazy. Did that just come naturally, or are there lessons there happening?
Well, I didn't take a lot of lessons. I took about 3 or 4 months worth of lessons just to get the basics, basic like campfire chords and stuff. And then from that point, I just started kind of teaching myself and listening to records. I was lucky enough that my ear developed pretty quickly, and I think that was kind of what led me into sound and all that, which we get into later on too. It's just my ear for pitch is really good. So I was able to, I was putting on the LP or cassette, and and taking the needle and put it back and listen to the song through and through. Not like today where you can just take a little edit of a chunk of a part and go through it, but yeah, so I just started learning songs, right? And at that time too, they just started doing well, not just started, but guitar tablature. So it was a lot easier because I wasn't really a big music reader. I could read music, but not, when you get the big stack chord frames, I'd be like, oh, I can't do
Yeah,
this.
guitar tabs are what I learned on as well. I remember loving it, like old school computers, old school printers, and like printing out tabs. And I had, a whole booklet I would make. Yeah.
Oh yeah, oh for sure. Yeah, I remember doing that too with tabs. But yeah, tabs were great. Where just at first it was just like grab like Guitar Player magazine or whatever, and just whatever they were featuring that month because it was always something good. It was, when I was playing, it was either a Randy Tune or it's like a Steve Vai or Joe Satriani or a White Snake song or something like that. It was really cool, and you learn licks out of it too, right? Because to imitate is to create, when you know what I mean? You just go through that stuff, and then it becomes something, a part of your arsenal, right? So that's how it went. I was just learning songs that I liked and lead guitar stuff that I liked to my ear, and that in turn my crank, and it started snowballing, and then from there it was just all self-taught stuff, like getting into scales and chord structures and voicings, and then connecting everything up the fretboard, right? So yeah, I was really into that. I practiced like crazy when probably the most I've ever practiced was, from the start till about 15 or 16, right? And that 4 years, I just went haywire on guitar,
Just
right?
hours a day.
Yeah, yeah, I would just sit there. Like, I remember my buddies would give me a hard time because in the winter they'd want to go tobogganing or something. And it's like, no, I'm practicing guitar, right? And then it's like, you suck. It's like, well, no, I'm not going to suck at all. Actually, I'm going to get really good on guitar. And, so.
I remember seeing a Tom Morello interview where when he first started playing guitar,
Yeah.
he was playing 8 hours a day, just like every day for years, 8 hours a day. And he thought, there can't be anybody else on the planet practicing this much. Like I have to get good if I do this. So that was his claim to fame.
Yeah, that's the key. It's just you have to absolutely totally commit, right? 100%. And that's why those guys are where they're at because they were able to do that, right? So like
He knocked out his 10,000 hours in like a
oh
year or something. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, right quick. Yeah, great player. But that's all those guys, like all those guitar greats, man. They say the exact same thing. It's just you got to just commit and hammer it out and take in as much as you can and search, for knowledge and keep trying new things, right? So that's why those guys are where they're at.
So the listeners and I can see about 5 or 6 guitars behind you on the wall. There's about the same amount that we can't see on the other walls. Is there such thing as having too many guitars as a guitarist?
Well, my wife thinks so, but yeah, as a guitar player, absolutely not. It's just that if I won the lottery, I'd have hundreds and hundreds, maybe 1,000 of them.
You'd have a bed made out of guitars. You'd have a throne like the Game of Thrones throne out of guitars.
Yeah, I just love the instrument, like just more so than just having them for the different tones and stuff. Like I just love the instrument, just like people love motorcycles and stuff, right? It's just like they like to ride and stuff, but they don't mind just sitting there staring at it and cleaning it and working on it too, right? It's like a love affair with the instrument, right? I just love the different body types and the different tones and stuff for different styles of music, right? So yeah, love the instrument fully.
So I have some kind words here from a world-class musician who is well aware of your guitar prowess. So this is from Chuck Daly, who's been a member of I Mother Earth. You've worked with the Salads.
Okay.
This is what he has to say. He says, the first time I ever saw Dan was in the Arts Music Store in Newmarket in 1988. So shout out to Newmarket. I'll never forget it because I thought he looked so cool. I remember thinking that there's a guy that's going to grow up to be a rock star. I've been fortunate enough since then to have played in multiple bands and tour across Canada with this amazing musician. Dan is not only one of the greatest shredders in the country, he's one of the best front of house and tour managers on the planet. I love Dan a lot, and we've had so many laughs together and made so much great music over the years. So Chuck Daly, I Mother Earth, the Salads.
Chuck is being way too nice. I appreciate him greatly. Chuck is an awesome guy. Yeah, I met him obviously very, very young. We didn't hang out a lot in like mid-teens, but I'd see him and like Dave Z and stuff from the Salads at the Arts Music Store. And I'd always love running into them. Like Dave and Chuck would be sitting there, grabbing guitars off the wall and just, especially Dave, because he went to GIT, just got home from GIT in LA, and he's just shredding. I'm just like, wow, this guy, like, just like aspired to be like that. I think he was honestly like an influence more than just an acquaintance and a buddy. And just Dave is a huge influence, man. He's taught me a lot over the years because we um, spent some time in bands with like Chuck and Dave doing like the cover band circuit, in Northern Ontario and that for a couple of weeks at a time. We had a good time back then. It's a long time ago, like 20 years ago, we used to do that. But yeah, above and beyond that too, I ended up doing sound for the Salads a lot. Basically, when I was starting up into doing live sound, I come home from school for recording and production, and just remain friends over the years, and always kind of intertwining somewhere. Like, I hadn't seen Chuck for years, and then I ended up, getting a job with I'm Other doing sound. He was in the band, and so it was great to be on the road with him again, and we'd have that little laugh after the show, having a beer, and be like, you think this would be us, like, jet setting, out to wherever, and rocking a show together, you and sound, and playing bass in this band, and we'd have a good chuckle at that. Yeah, Chuck's one of the good ones, man. That's for sure. Good human being.
What's funny is Chuck and the Salads were a big part of your start with live sound, and Chuck was actually a big part of the success of this podcast. So I had been doing it for a year or a year and a half, and it wasn't focused just on musicians. I would get, authors, I would get inspirational speakers, and fitness people, just people that were great at what they did in whatever industry. And you know, I had been in touch with Chuck just a little bit, but didn't know him that well. And he's the first guest I had that had like a legit name attached to it with I Mother Earth, with the Salads. And then once he came on, then just the name attached to him, suddenly Finger 11 was interested. And then once you have I Mother Earth and Finger 11, two multi-platinum bands, then almost every other band is like, well, if those guys are doing it, I should probably do it. So Chuck was like the gateway drug into the music world. So I really appreciate him as well.
Chuck is a gateway drug to good music, I guess. I'll say. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's awesome. No, I've seen the whole progression, because I remember seeing Chuck's podcast with you, and it was great. It was a great listen, and watched all the way through, and it's cool. It's neat, especially a couple of guys I know on with you, seeing all these things that we never really maybe talk about, like the early start, and the little tiny pinpoints to the career that I might not know about just because we're working together and not talking about that. So these are really interesting to watch, right? Get to know my friends a little bit more.
Yeah, so we're talking about guitar, the early days, you picking up a guitar, developing your talent. Was there anything that you wanted to be as a kid when you grew up before you decided you wanted a career in the music industry? Anything stand out as a kid?
I think I want to be Batman. I think
That might be the only career that's less stable than a musician. But yes.
Yeah. There's no money in that unless you're a billionaire that wants to fight crime. But yeah, I think it was just the regular stuff when I was like really little, like like other copper or fireman or something like that. But I can't remember much else other than when I was, like I said, 8 or 9 years old. When I was like, I need to. It was really focused on guitar, but it was just about being like in a band and playing live too, right? Like it just that whole live thing really struck a chord with me, right? And then the big stage, big lights, you'd see that just in video at the time, but then early teen stuff and starting to go to shows, right? Where I was just like, okay, now I really want to do this, right? In an arena, and the PA is just big and massive, and that sub is hitting you right in the chest, and I think that not only sparked you wanting to play live in a band, like it really was the first inkling of you wanted to do, I think, live sound subconsciously, right? Because just that environment, and I was always looking at sound console and just wondering really what that was controlling, and
Looked like a spaceship. Like, how could someone possibly know what every button does on that thing?
Yeah, big time, right? And just like I look at the rigging and stuff and see the PA and it hanging from the rafters, and I'm like, this is insane, right?
How do people get up there? This is crazy,
right? You don't know yet, right? You just wonder, that there was a baseball game the day before at the Dome, and it's like, how did they get this all done, right? And so I was always in wonderment of that whole thing, the whole live show aspect, especially the bands at the time, which were the bands like I just saw, like the Def Leppard, the Motley Crue, and Metallica, Guns N' Roses, all that stuff, right?
Were those like the first concerts that you saw? Can you
Uh,
remember the first
yeah,
like two or three?
basically, I think the very, very first show, like real big show I went to, I think it was like 12. Yeah, I think it was 12, and I went and saw Bon Jovi at the CNE. He had the CNE Stadium there, and with Skid Row opening, and I was they had just
Wow.
me and my buddies are like huge fans, right? They were the big like like a band of that like 88,
Was there
87.
just like a ton of like beautiful women there for Bon Jovi?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I think it's half the reason why we wanted to go, right? 13-year-old dudes, you know.
Sorry, it reminds me. I went to school for audio engineering. I went to OEARD in London, and I remember being 18, and John Mayer was playing at the arena there in London. I was a big John Mayer fan as a guitarist, and I went, and it was like the greatest night of my life. Not just because it was John Mayer and it was awesome, but it was me and like 10,000 women. Like there wasn't like it was before the industry caught on that he wasn't just, your body is a wonderland pop star, that he was like a legit guitarist,
Oh,
legit blues guy. So at that point, it was just your body's a wonderland is me and 10,000 women that like thought he was cute and made, really lovey-dovey songs. So it was a great night.
yeah, it's funny 'cause I obviously got that whole same thing from him too, as like pop star or whatever, and then you see more videos and stuff. The guy, and that guy can play, man. He is an amazing player, amazing writer. He's just got it for sure. Yeah.
If you and I were friends when you were 16 and you invited me over to listen to some albums, what albums would you have been playing at that time? At 16, you're a teenager now.
Oh yeah, the stuff I was just talking about, like Ozzy, always on repeat. But Guns N' Roses, the Skid Row, Black Album had just come out. I think it was 15, so that was on repeat for quite a while. That album blew me and my friends away. Um, and to go off top for 2 seconds, I think it's the first time where I wanted to get into recording and production because the sound of that record, right? It was just massive.
The Black Album from Metallica in 91
Yeah,
with
exactly.
with Bob Rock.
Yeah, just that sound. Those drums are just massive and thick, and the guitars are just like they're so punishing, but so clean, like but distorted, right? Masterfully produced and mixed record. A lot of diehard Metallica fans like, oh, Black Album, don't like that record, especially when we were kids, right? All my thrash buddies were just like, no, they suck now. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, this is a progression into their amazingness, like, so.
Yeah, all the hardcore Metallica fans, it's like your favorite album has to be like Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning,
Yeah.
Master of Puppets, and Justice for All. Anything after that is the sellout time, even though it's like there's lots of great music there.
No, that record was rocking. And don't get me wrong, I love all those records. Like Master of Puppets is one of my favorite metal records of all time. Love it all. But that Black Album is just they were just coming into their own, and it's a bit of a departure, but it's still like core Metallica, and it's just produced beautifully, and the songwriting is amazing, and yeah, it's just great.
Yeah, it's basically it's Metallica for the first time. The first four albums were great, but sonically, the Black Album was like levels above as far as sound quality. You could finally hear the bass and all the instruments, and they shortened a lot of the songs so they were more 4 or 5 minutes instead of 7, 8, 9 minutes, and harmonies, like great harmonies, which is more of like a pop element, which is a part of why it's maybe they sold out or something. But I remember having Guitar Hero Metallica. I still have it actually. I gave the 360 with the guitar to my nieces to get into video games. And I still, when I go over, it's there. And man, sad but true.
Yeah,
That song sounds so good. The drum, you're mentioning the drums, the da 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 da. Those drums sound so big.
snare drum just alone, like it's funny because as large as snare drums have gone on to sound a little strange, but on that record, like it's the most massive snare drum I think I've ever heard to date at that point for sure. Yeah, the whole album is just slave. Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about the snare drum on that album. Does that mean that when they got onto the Saint Anger snare drum where it sounded like a trash can, was that hard to listen to for you as an audio guy?
No, because I couldn't. I think I heard the first track and it's just yeah, I couldn't even really listen to it from that snare. Like it was just too much, like so trashy, right? You just take over the mix and everything's super compressed and distorted, right? So it's like, oh, especially doing what I do, doing
Yeah.
recording and live sound. I was just like, I can't do it. Like even the songs were, just right up there. I still like the production is 50% of it for me. You have the best written song in the world and production's not there. Like, doesn't turn the crank.
And no guitar solos on that album. So all the guitarists are like, oh man,
Yeah,
one of their secret weapon, well, not so secret, but one of their weapons isn't there. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Widdly was gone for a little bit there.
Mm.
Yeah,
What are some of the jobs that you had before becoming a professional musician, professional sound tech?
yeah.
Can you remember some of the horrible jobs you had leading up to that?
It's actually funny to hear professional musician, professional sound tech. I'm used to, but professional musician, I'm something that's like a foreign term because I didn't even think of it back then when we were doing that. And I guess we were at the time, but
If you're getting paid for your craft, I
yeah,
call that a professional.
yeah. So yeah, before that, it was just like regular jobs. It was basically, like in my teens, it was just jobs in like kitchen cooking or whatever. I went with and worked with my stepdad for a little bit, and he was a welder, so I'd help him out shop and all that. But basically, by trying to think, I think 16, 17 is when I started teaching guitar. Just do like one night a week at the Arts. It was mostly I was filling in. I was like the number one fill-in guy because I was working during the day a little bit too. So I'd fill in guitar at the Arts, and then basically after that, I do the cover band circuit. That's when I played with like Dave and Chuck and Grant from the Salads, and then a guy named Zeke Myers. He actually is a part of one of the Phoenix and manages I Mother Earth and Finger 11 now, and he's always been a musician in the industry and putting on shows. And they ran a music school, and I taught there a little bit. But yeah, right after that, basically like early 20s when I got home from school for recording engineering. I was doing studio sessions, a little bit of gigging, and teaching guitar. At that point, it just kind of just progressed all from there.
And how early on did you know that you had a talent, that you had something to offer as a musician or as a sound tech, that people would be willing to pay for that, and that you could maybe do this as a career? So I guess the transition from hobby to maybe becoming a professional in the industry.
Yeah, I think it's a weird one for me because I actually never looked at it. Like I look at it like saying playing guitar and stuff is more of like a hobby now, right? Because my career is being a sound technician in TM. But yeah, I think I don't know. It's so hard to say because right when I was like 11 years old, I'm like, I'm doing this, right? It's just like that was
At 11, wow.
yeah, like right when I started playing guitar, I was just so mesmerized by the whole thing. Like I said, the instrument itself, the songwriting. I hadn't gotten more into recording yet. We'll get into that. I was kind of mid-teens, but the whole live show aspect and touring and all that, like I was just totally drawn to it. So I knew I was going to do something, but it wasn't until basically I got home from recording school again. So it was 22 or 23, and started working at Newmarket Multimedia. It was a studio owned by Mike Kerwin, who I had met previously. Did a little bit of co-op there for a couple of months when I was like 18, 19, and started actually doing real sessions. And that's when I started working with Clarknova guys who I'd all known from before, from being in bands when I was teens, and I was in a band with the drummer John Lord. So when I started doing that, I was doing overdubs for their record and starting some pre-production for the second record a little later on. Then I was like, the wheels were turning, right? And I started doing live sound for them and a couple other bands locally around Newmarket. And that's when everything really started turning. I'm like, okay, at that point I wasn't in a band anymore. I'd gone through all my teen bands and early 20 bands. I was like, maybe this is just what I'm going to do. And that's when that really started going. I took a chunk of time where I was not in a band at all. I was so 22 to 27. I didn't even think of being in a band. Probably I thought I was never going to be in a band ever again. Maybe a jam or something, but not as a career path. Right. It was more just about studio and writing and producing and working with bands in the studio environment, which was my focus, and a little bit of live sound at that time.
Our listeners get a kick out of all the different band names that, successful musicians, we know the names Clarknova and Big Wreck and all these bands, but a lot of times we haven't heard of the bands that they started in. Can you share some of the names of the bands that you were in before eventually Clarknova?
Yeah, for sure. So my first band in high school, which was formed like a couple of weeks into high school, with me and my buddy I mentioned earlier across the street from me, were playing guitar. My brother ended up playing bass, and we found a drummer in grade nine, and we ended up calling that band Shattered Youth. I think it was a play off of because we were big Skid Row fans. Like they had just come onto the circuit, so Youth Gone Wild was their first single, and it was 1989, right? So so Shattered Youth was that one. Then I ended up playing in a band with Grant from the Salads. Actually, he was in a band called Play Dirty, right? And it
That's
was
a
all,
good name. I like
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. It's funny because it was when I joined Play Dirty. It was just on that cusp of like alt rock and grunge and the whole Seattle scene starting, right? Like 92, 93, right? So we knew that things were changing, and it was like we just said, you know what, we don't care. We're just gonna keep playing like late 80s, like rock, and because we just loved it, right? So it was that whole style, like that GNR and Skid Row, Motley Crue type of thing. We just kept playing that for a couple of years. So sorry, I'm going off into stories about the bands, but it's all just triggering, right? So yeah, after Play Dirty, I was in a band. It was the first incarnation of a band called Four Barrel, and we went the exact opposite route from what I was doing. We were like basically just this side of death metal, but more on like on the groove metal side, like really Pantera. Like we were getting into bands like Pantera and Sepultura, and I think a Korn was just coming on the circuit. So we were uber heavy. So after that, after Four Barrels, when I actually took that big break, went to school for recording, and then basically the next band I was in was Clarknova down the line a little bit.
Oh man. So you mentioned John Lord earlier, and
Yeah.
then you just mentioned Four Barrel. Uh
Yeah.
so I have a quote here from John Lord
Oh,
of
yeah.
Clark Nova, and he starts by saying, "Ask him about Four Barrel."
Yeah.
So there we go. You talked about it. He says he was 18, I was 22, and man, we were really heavy. He actually had some F bombs in there that I took out.
Okay.
Then I joined Clark Nova, and when the first guitar player left, we needed a guy, and I said, Dano or no one else. And he delivered. After we were in Clark Nova, he just took off and made the best of every opportunity he could get his hands on, and is one of the best in the business. He makes me proud. It's from John Lord, Clark
Uh,
Nova.
Good old Lordy. Yeah, he was a quintessential part for me joining the band because he was such a good buddy, and I've been in a band with him already. And we'd already been doing some pre-pro in the studio. So that's that whole Clark Nova thing. I don't even think I got asked to be in the band, dude. Honestly,
You
dude,
just were. Just one day it was.
like I think it was Zeke, the band's manager. Like let's mention Zeke before, and the manager's time with Finger 11 now, and he was managing the band at that time. And they came in the studio one day, and he's like, "Looks like Scotty's out. You're in, right?" I'm like, "Oh, okay." I think it was in the middle of the session. He just opens the door, and he's like, "Yeah." So you're in Clark Nova now. So I'm like, "Okay, I guess so. Here we go." Right? Which was I would have. He didn't really even have to ask. I would have said yes immediately anyway. Right?
A lot of times it's when a member leaves a band and they need to be replaced, it's usually someone that's tight within the crew, someone that's already worked with the band in some capacity. A lot of times it's the guitar tech, if it's a guitarist, or the drum tech. So for example, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, when Frusciante left, it was not the first time where Dave Navarro came in, but later on for some more recent albums, it was their guitar tech that came in. And then Stain, when their drummer left, their drum tech Sal came in, and it's like they already know him. He's you're if you're a guitar tech for a well-known band, you're usually a good guitarist yourself. You're there every night. It's already a part of your life. You know the songs inside and out. So that happens quite frequently.
It does. It happens really frequently. So that's, organically, that's why that happened. Working with back in the day, doing all that pre-production, I had done sound for them, like probably at that point, like 20 or 30 times already. So yeah, it was like a little shoe in. We were able to get to work right away and start rehearsing. You know, because they were at that time I joined the band, they were halfway through recording the follow-up record to Host. They were doing Anexia, and that was getting produced and recorded by Jag Tana, My Mother Earth. So yeah, we were getting right into rehearsals, you know, and managed to get on one song in the record, you know, the the intro track, "Exile at Home." You know, came out to a rehearsal one night. And I had a couple of chord changes and a little bit of structure changes to it, and he really dug it. And he's like, "Let's make a studio date next week, man. Let's get that song done, right?" So that was cool because I didn't think I'd record anything on the record, right? It was just you know, to actually be playing on one tune was great, and then it was more just about, you know, doing the follow up tour, which I was really excited about, going out with my buddies, you know, and going on tour for a year. You know?
So you went to school for audio engineering, you got out, you did some work in the studio as well as some live stuff. Then you built a studio in Newmarket, which is how Clarknova came into the picture. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, it was just, well, Clarknova was a bit before because when I was working at Newmarket Multimedia, Mike Kerwin's studio, that's where they were doing a lot of their overdub recording. And they were so we were producing the record. It was Brad Nelson down at Great Big Music producing the record. So I think they did drum tracks there and doing some vocal and guitar overdubs at Newmarket Multimedia. But then just naturally, I guess when we built that studio, which Mike and Zeke were a part of, they funded the whole thing. I just funded my time and that was my little part in it to get it built. But that's when the guys would come in because they were getting ready to do the second record when they were starting to write, and we started running pre-pro. So they come in, you know, a night or two a week over like it seemed like months now, half a year, just keep bringing new tunes and working on them and changing the arrangements and just having fun with it, and you know, and molding them to, you know, they would, you know, eventually be on Anexia, which went through another whole process. Then when Jag got his hands on it, the songs totally changed again. There's, you know, multiple levels of those songs changing, right? But that was where everything kind of glued in with me and the Clarknova guys, because there was so many sessions, like all night. You know, leave the studio at 5 a.m. Sun's coming up. You know, totally worth it, 100%.
So two of my best friends have been massive Clarknova fans and massive I Mother Earth fans from the very beginning. And one of them sent in a fan question. So
Okay.
this is from Eric Claremont. He says, how did getting Jag Tana to produce their album come about? And whose idea was it to have him guest star on one of the songs?
Yeah. He ripped an amazing solo on a song called Finn. Um, yeah. So a lot of people do know this, but Steve Koba, the singer for Clarknova, actually auditioned to be I'm Other singer when
Brian came in.
yeah. So it was actually down to Steve Koba and Brian, right? So Brian ended up getting the job, but Jag and Steve remained good buddies, you know, and keeping in touch. You know, Clarknova just right at that time. That's when Clarknova released Host. It was right around that same time as I'm Other Earth put out the record with Brian, first one. Yeah, and so when the second record came up, it was, you know, I think they went through a couple of guys doing a couple of demos after we were doing pre-production. Then they went to Jag, and he was really interested, and that's how it all came to be. You know, it's that they were already buddies before, right? So.
How, man, can we take a moment to acknowledge how talented Jag is as a guitarist, um, his harmonies that he provides on stage, as a producer, as an audio engineer. He just has this vibe to him that like oozes talent in like all musical realms. Can we acknowledge him for a second?
Absolutely, yeah. He's definitely one of those guys that's the full package, right? And they're kind of, you wouldn't think of it, they're few and far between on that level, right? And he's definitely one of those guys, man. He's a super tasty player. His tone's always ripping, you know. It's good. It's like I love when guitars are really distorted, but they sound clean. You know what I mean? It almost sounds like they're on a clean channel for a second, you know. And that's just him that's playing. He's got great hands, great fingers, and great ear. And it's just led into you know, stuff for recording and producing it as well, right? Got a great ear for that, for tones and where things should be placed in a mix, and textures, and, you know, harmonies for backups, and, you know, melodies for lead singers. Yeah, he's definitely a total package.
When you decided that you were going to pursue music full time, was there any resistance from family or friends? You know, a lot of times when we're young, we're told, get that good education, get that solid job. Music, that's a hobby, that it's that's a pipe dream of having a career in the music industry. Did you have that resistance? And if so, how did you kind of break through that?
Yeah, yeah, mildly, like from my mom and then some people surrounding and stuff, right? Because when you're a kid, obviously, if they're not a musician themselves, they just don't understand, And just when I was, getting into that like workforce age, 15, 16 years old, already been playing for like 4 years, and just like no, like I'm gonna do something in around this, and that's I think when I first started looking at other things to do, if that wasn't to, work as being, a guitar player in a band or, or whatever. Yeah, I got a little bit of resistance, but it was heavily met. Like the brick wall kind of just went up because I wouldn't have it, So I had to do other things to make ends meet, of course, right? But there was always that focus and never kind of waned. It's like I'm going to do something, whether it be guitar player in a band or a recording engineer, producer, writer, or live sound guy, right? One thing I said, and I didn't ever say I was going to be a TM, right? But here I am, right? So, but yeah, the focus was always there. Yeah.
Was there a moment where your family kind of came around and kind of realized like, oh, he's going to be just fine doing this in the music industry? A lot of bands I talk to, it's like their family and friends didn't take them seriously until they got like a Juno nomination or a Grammy
Yeah.
nomination, or there was like a moment that is undeniable where it's like the rest of the world has acknowledged that their child is legit and has talent.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's probably two parts of it. I guess it's one of the younger part where I've just been doing it for so long. So like early 20s, already at like a decade in of playing and doing that whole cycle of things and gigging and starting to get into recording and live sound and that. It's like there was that portion, but it was actually probably when I really started touring with the more known bands, right? Instead of just working for a production company and being like an operations manager or system tech, right? So when I started going out with like the Platinum Blonde guys and then into April Wine, right? And that's only just been in the last decade, right? So, finding some people and stuff and siblings like, oh wow, like okay, Dan's actually really doing this. It's 20 years later, they knew it was a struggle, right? Like it was always a struggle. So and I had to do some other things to make my lifestyle work, my ends meet, and support my family in that. But it was always, either gig on a weekend or a session. And then I was starting to, get there when I started working with the production company and full time work there. But then, full time just with bands, strictly is when, I think everybody went, okay, he's full out doing this for real, right? So
I always looked at the resistance from family as, we fear what we don't understand.
yeah,
And,
exactly.
our parents, even when we're adults, they still see a part of us as like that kid in diapers, right? And it's like their job is to protect you. And if they're not musicians or if they don't understand the music industry, they they want you to do what you love, but they don't want you to suffer in poverty and these different things. So, I always see it as usually coming from a loving place. It's just more of a misunderstanding and a fear, if that makes sense.
Exactly it. It's just misunderstanding. It's just like you said. It's like if you're not in it and know that from a musician side and just whatever fires in your brain at the early ages and all those connections that are made that make you know what being a musician is. If you've never experienced that, there's no way you're going to relate to the passion and that the dream that somebody has to want to do that. It's just impossible, right? So and that's the thing. It's a hard industry, and there's a lot of struggle, and there's a lot of sacrifice, and they see you going through that, and trying to be supportive, but they want to also say "I told you so" kind of thing, right? But it is from a loving place, and so that's appreciated. But that's why it's so hard because you just gotta focus right through and just have the noise just be that, and off to the side, and keep that focus on what you're doing.
I've heard it called the evil gene. Those of us that like are obsessed with music, and it's, you know, we couldn't be doing anything else. We wouldn't be happy, despite maybe how hard it is to make a living. It's there's just no other choice because I mean, you could get a job, here in Ottawa, everybody works for the government and they get paid well and they get benefits and they retire early and pension, all this stuff. But it's like, even with that safety net there, and you'd still be miserable because the music, that evil gene, that music is in you, and it's you gotta follow that through.
Absolutely. Yeah. Once you grab it, it's almost like it's an outside force. It's not like you're even deciding to do it anymore. It's like kind of, I feel like it just comes from within you. And if you don't do it, yeah, it can leave you being kind of miserable. Like, I go times where it's just, obviously do a tour break and just do normal stuff or whatever, and just hang out and do the stuff I need to do around the house or go away with the family and that. But like, yeah, it's like basically within a couple of weeks, if I'm not doing something like playing guitar or write a tune or doing a gig or out the road doing a little run or a tour or whatever, it does change my perception a little bit and just my comfort level just within my own skin. So I have to keep doing it. It's like I said, it's above and beyond me. It's just a force that just makes me do it, or yeah, and just don't feel normal, right?
With Clarknova, was there a favorite part of you being in that band, or maybe a fondest memory of that period of time?
Well, just I guess it's that tour that followed up and released the record. Record came in like August, and then that tour, we toured Canada with a band called Showcore. They were at
Nice.
the time great guys. We had a blast. We were partying pretty good, and 27 years old, so we were giving it pretty good. So it was just a really fun time. It's just like first uh, real tour, I guess. Going right across Canada in a school bus with a bunch of my buddies, right? So very memorable time, like seeing the country for the first time myself, for myself, seeing, playing gigs nightly, just I'm like, okay, we're doing this, right? It's just that raise up and like, okay, it's all happening, it's all happening, it's all happening, right? So it was a really good time. Um, yeah, and just more so, just after that tour into the new year, we hit the road with I'm Mother Earth a lot. Did some smaller, like 2 week runs, and then just a bunch of one offs on weekends or a couple of double ups, and that was a lot of fun because they were really well attended shows, and opening for a band of that level on a constant basis, just a lot of fun. So that year and a half, um, it's hard to say one particular thing or one moment in that time. It's just that whole chunk of time. It was a lot of fun going and do that, and it really taught me the rigors and the rules of the road, and what that all entails as well, right? Which kind of was the start prep for me getting into touring with bands as a sound guy, right?
So Clarknova releases a new single called "Shut Up and Live" in 2020. So this is after like a lengthy hiatus. How does a new song come to be in 2020? And is that a one-off, or can the Clarknova fans get excited that there's a possibility of some new music in the future?
Yeah, we were obviously not doing much in 2020, so there was some writing happening, and all the guys we all talk quite a bit, so I was doing some writing, and I had a structure of a tune. It was basically just like a little intro verse and a chord frame for a chorus, right? And just the way that I layered the guitars on it and stuff, I'm like, this sounds like a Clark Nova tune, right? Which is funny because that wasn't a big part of the writing team at all, right? I just do pre-production and just a little bit of stuff on the second record on that one tune. So it was neat that it kind of this Clark Nova-ish tune came out to me that showed the guys, and they were like, definitely sounds like a Clark Nova tune. So we all kind of started collaborating from home. Steve started writing lyrics and melody. Um, I was putting more guitars and stuff on at home. Everybody was listening to the tune. And right at that time, when we were trading that song around, a very dear friend of mine, Blair Hall, he had moved home from the States. He'd been down in the States for quite a long time, lived in LA for a while, and then I think he was in Ohio for quite a bit, and then yeah, he ended up being in Chicago for quite a while, and then he ended up moving home. This is a guy that I went to recording school with, So he set up his studio at his house. He was living down the street, right? And so it's like, hey, bud, if you want to start on some projects, how about we start with Clarknova guys can come in and maybe we can slang the song together. And he obviously agreed. And then we just started putting the tune together. We had Lordy up, did the drums, and did some guitar. We had Shecky up, did the bass. It was all starting to come together. Greg came up, uh, added some awesome layers on there. Put the solo on it after. Steve came up, did all the vocal, and it was just like, there it is, right? We thought it was just gonna be a little fun project, right? But it ended up turning out to be a really cool tune. It sounded great. Like Blair did an amazing job on it. It sounds great. So it's like, hey, why don't we just put this out as a Clarknova tune just for people that are still hanging around, just on our Facebook or whatever, just something kind of new for them. It was just fun, right? And it actually got some radio spins and stuff, right? It was just fun, right? It was just it was a nice uplifting time for all of us. I think we all needed it. So
It was like cathartic after, during the pandemic to do something positive, release something creative.
Absolutely, because I was right in the thick of it. That was like basically May. It was May, June. We were recording that, right? So, that was definitely needed at that time. We were writing some other stuff and that too, right? So it was definitely that summer was filled with, being creative and getting that song done and out near the end of the summer just to put it out. We weren't looking to get back on the circuit or anything or go on a world tour when the pandemic was over or anything. We just wanted to put a tune out. It's just for fun, just for the process. The process, I think for all of us, it's the most, it's our favorite part. It's just so much fun, it's so exciting, right? So.
You already mentioned that the song sounds great. I was going to say the same thing. When you have a good pair of studio headphones and you crank that song, it sounds incredible. So credit is due to Blair and the crew, everyone that worked for the audio side, the recording, the mixing, the producing, mastering, all that stuff. And you also mentioned there's a guitar solo. So this is a badass guitar solo, and you're actually playing that solo.
Yeah.
Can you give the guitar players that are listening, can you give an insight into how you achieve kind of that big signature sound? Maybe guitar, pedal, amp, is there anything there? Some secret sauce?
Yeah, actually, might have to ask Blair because actually that recording that was all plugins, and I think we were using I think the STL Labs, or I actually got to let him. I got to talk to him and see what we were actually using on that. But we went through a bunch of stuff, and that's the cool thing nowadays, just having those plugins, and they're starting to just sound incredible. And a lot of guys are getting like signature model plugins, like there's a John Petrucci, a Mesa Boogie model and this and that, right? All these guitar players have their signature things. So, just keep trying stuff out and blending it. That one, it's pretty high gain, but that one I wanted to have a little more screech to it. So I ended up using a Telecaster. It's actually my metal like Telecaster. It's the Charvel there with the Fishman Fluence pickups in it, roasted maple neck, and it's got a nice thin profile. So in 24 fret, so it's made to burn, right? So it's definitely had the right sound for that little solo, So that was a really fun solo to come up. I haven't actually written and recorded a lead for a dog's age. I can't even remember when, maybe 15 or so years or anything, but yeah, so it was a lot of fun doing that and laying it down, and it's a cool part of the tune. All my guitar buddies just like, nice ripping solo, bud, right? So it's cool, like not being an active, overly active guitar player or not a pro guitar player on the circuit anymore. It's nice to get your buddies like Ian Thorne to go, man, that solo's ripping. I was like, geez, like, thanks, dude.
That's
like,
some high praise. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I don't know if he was just fibbing me to make me feel better, but
I'll take it either way. Yeah.
yeah,
It felt good to unleash the beast with that guitar solo. Yeah.
huge. Yeah, for sure. I do it constantly. Like, there's not many days when I'm home that go by that I don't pick up the guitar for an hour and just go through some stuff to keep the fingers limber and keep the calluses going, or try something new, right, here and there. So yeah, it's definitely a big part of my life, and I love going for a rip, man. It's it's one of my favorite things to do. Yeah.
As a guitarist, do you have an app on your phone or a hard drive on your computer where there's just all these guitar licks and riffs? If ever you're going to be writing songs, you can just go on there and pluck them out.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think you get like a 500 gig drive that's probably got, yeah, 50 or 60 other riffs or just licks, or like, some whole tunes with the lyrics on them, or whatever. That mostly came back from, like, back in the day, like 2009, 10, 11. I was writing, well, 2007, 2011. I was in a band called Days Left, and I was actually fronting it. So I started singing, and singing lead and playing guitar and writing like crazy. So yeah, just from that time alone, there's probably like 40 or 50 tunes that it's just, I can't even remember some of them. There's some that kind of stick in my head, right? I can hear the riffs here and there, but yeah, there's definitely some on there. It'd be neat to actually throw that drive and get Pro Tools up and going again and see what's what. Oh, you get some diamonds in the rough there.
Have you ever had a song or a riff come to you so easily and in such a complete form that it felt like you were just kind of the medium that it passed through, that it was like a gift from infinite intelligence or source or God or however you want to say it? Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, I feel like that for sure, especially back like when we were just kind of starting out and stuff, like, in those bands, like, 'cause you're in your teens, early 20s, like you're on fire, your brain's just on, set on 11, and you're all collaborating, and that, so those tunes getting written with those bands back in the day, like, go back to John Lord mentioning Four Barrel, like, we formed that band and we were opening up for the pre-Clarknova band called Tribal Stomp. They were playing in Newmarket. They would need an opening band. They came by our jam unit. I think we were 2 weeks in, maybe a week and a half, and they asked us to open a show the next week. And we just went on supercharge. We had like 5 songs written, and we wrote like another like 3 or 4 songs in like 3 or 4 days. We felt like they were just ripping, and we went and played like a 45-minute set. Like, we totally felt like we were maybe not ready, but we went up there and it was just, it was all the Clarknova guys, like Steve and Scotty and Greg. And we were just like, holy cow! Like, so it's like, you guys were in Play Dirty like 3 weeks ago, and now like you're in this uber metal band and you got a whole set of original tunes, right? So that's like, that's definitely a time like that. It just felt like kind of magic. It just did, just riffing, and it just all came together like that. Like lyrics, backup vocals, everything, like, the structure, everything would just come together so fast, you know.
In 2012, you started working with Platinum Blonde as a monitor and guitar tech.
Yeah,
Would you consider that your first big break on the live side of the music industry?
for sure. Yeah, that's when I really started traveling. Because before then, I was just working for Frontier Sound and Light for years prior. And it was just all Southern Ontario stuff, and basically setting up PA, running sound for like opening bands, or just being a system tech, just being an audio tech there to support the touring guys coming in, right? So out of that, and out of the networking through all that, that's where I met sound guy John O'Sullivan for Platinum Blonde, and yeah, he asked if I go do a summer full of gigs for them. It was like 4 or 5 shows. It's like, yeah, I think I'm busy. Like Frontier Sound Light was just slam crazy busy, but I was like, I can fit these in. It'll be fun to do. So I did that gig. Like it was like Canada Day 2000 whatever 12, yeah, and just down in Markham, so not far. And after the gig, the guys asked me if I'd just be their full time guy, right? And so going into the fall, and that's when they got really busy, and we started. It was more just weekends, but it was like every weekend for months, right? So yeah, that's when I kind of transferred into that, and it was like basically like 2 years of that, still doing production company stuff, but definitely the Platinum Blonde guys were that little catalyst, for me getting onto the touring circuit in Canada.
So I have some kind words sent in from Platinum Blonde drummer Dan Todd. So he says the most grounded, down to earth, kind hearted, caring. No, this is a good quote. You should Save this somewhere. I'll start again. The most grounded, down to earth, kind hearted, caring, no nonsense, straight shooting tech I have ever worked with, and a superior family man. Dan has been there for me when it came to technical issues I didn't understand, and my pool issues I didn't understand either. Love ya, bro, from Dan Todd, drummer, Platinum Blonde.
Dan's great. Yeah, we were pretty tight. Him and I would do a lot of the traveling together and stuff. And then pick up the principals there. Mark Holmes and Sergio Galli, right, and go off and do our gigs. Yeah, we spent a lot of time on the road. Dan's a great guy, great drummer, and yeah, always super nice. Always super thankful. Like obviously, like in that quote that he just laid, he was always like that in person. So it's really nice to hear in writing. But he was always super super thankful. Which always just turns around to me wanting to work that much more for somebody. And people are kind and good people, right? You just want to work harder for them, and it just it reciprocates. It just kind of fuels back and forth. So yeah, thanks, Dan. That was a very nice quote.
So now is a good time to help out our listeners that aren't super familiar, if they're not very musical or they're not used to the technical side of music and live music. If we could maybe break down the various roles that there are. So in this case with Platinum Blonde, your role was monitor tech, monitors and guitar tech. Can you share what those two are? And then after that, we can talk about, what front of house is. People maybe don't know what that is. And the people that are lugging the equipment, just, I guess, different things to paint a clear picture of, it's usually not just one guy. There's like a whole crew that makes a live event happen.
Absolutely, right. And there's different scales, right? So let's say Platinum Blonde guys, I was kind of doubling up because me being a guitar player and audio tech, right? And we were doing a little bit of a smaller circuit at the time. So, the lighting guy was also their TM, their front house guy, and then I was guitar tech and monitors, right? Just keep it down to a smaller crew a little bit. So with guitar tech, it's basically just making sure the guitars are kept in good shape, that the amps are kept in good shape, and all the electronics are running smooth, and that they're pedal board is all hooked up nicely and it's not going to fail, right? That's the thing, is just going through all the fail safe stuff, right? Changing strings on guitar makes sure the guitar is actually set up and nice and playable for the musician, and then on top of that, I'd run monitors. So it was basically, I think at the time we were just running the floor wedges. They weren't on the in-ears yet. So I would just, have a mixer like a similar or exactly the same, even as the front of house mixer, but you'd be sending different mixes. So instead of just like the PA, like the tops and the subs and some outfills and infills, you'd have just individual stations of monitors, right? And each guy would get their own separate mix. So this monitor desk would be capable of all those separate mixes, and you guys get their custom mixes and make sure that they're hearing themselves okay for their performance. So for that band, I covered both. It was I don't suggest it being a one-man thing in those two jobs. And as you get to that next level above, right, that job splits into two, right? So like take, for instance, a band like 3 Days Grace, that was just their monitor tech. And they'd have two guitar techs because there's too much going on. And it's, when you're in an arena and those places need, specific guys for the job, right? So yeah, that's in monitors and guitar tech, and then
so sorry, before you dive into the next thing. So with monitors, that's, you are in charge of just the sound for the musicians on stage. So you want them to be able to hear the different instruments, to have the mix that they want to bring out their best performance. It's not the sound that the crowd is hearing, correct? This is just for our listeners to know that there's two different things going on there with the sound.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just for stage, right? So it's all those guys up on deck. And like I said, it's either wedge monitors, so they're faced up at them, or nowadays, like for quite a while now, mostly everybody's just doing the in-ears. So it's just the buds, little wireless pack and transmitter, and then the outputs, the console for the individual mixes are just going to that transmitter and going right into the guy's ears. And it's great because they can be anywhere on stage and it sounds exactly the same. You can add things into the monitor mixes like a reverb and delay, like you would on a recording and stuff. So they're hearing this lovely spacious, big environment with a nice delay, and it's just, it's inspiring and uplifting and get you more into the show if you got a really good monitor tech, right? And knows how to put a really nice mix together.
Is there less chance for, say, feedback if there isn't the monitors blaring out too?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because all that, monitors on stage, it's all just live level and live volume, right? So just think of that's going back into microphones, right? So you're feeding that back into the microphones that are, into the sources going into the front of house mixer. And also when singers walking around, right, and they put their mic down on the ground, right, and pointing right in that speaker and squawk, right, you're gonna get that. So basically with in-ears, there's no feedback on stage. There's no real possibility of that, other than a guitar player trying to get some feedback on purpose, doing Jimi Hendrix or whatever, right? So
Are there any downsides to the in-ears?
um I think the only thing I've ever heard from guys that I work with is like they can just feel a little isolated, and especially if they're used to monitors like on the ground, right? So that big, spacious environment and feeling free and open eared, right? In like an arena or a big festival, you can lose that sensation a little bit. But actually, how we've, over the years, like people realize to actually get some crowd mics,
Oh,
condenser mics, and point them out at the crowd, right? And then blend that in to the in-ear mix, along with any reverbs and stuff and delays to create that environment. So, these days with modern consoles and how good you can make things sound and plugins and outboard gear, it's just like I really don't hear anybody having much of a downside, other than if they've just been used to wedges over the years and they're just starting on ears now and trying to get used to it. But once they get used to it, it's like I couldn't go. There's no way they could go back. you know.
so that's we've talked about the monitors for the musicians to hear themselves on stage. We've talked about the guitar techs and the instrument techs. So now for front of house sound tech and for tour manager, maybe if you could break down those
Yeah.
roles for our listeners.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. The front of house and TM thing, that's been a role that's combined over the years because the job's become, I guess, a little bit more efficient. Of course, back in the '80s when they're, having to get to a payphone and stuff and have their booklet and writing everything down on a typewriter to do day sheets and stuff, right? Like, it was a guy that would just be their TM and that's it, right? And this guy's booking flights and taking care of the crew and all that stuff. But
But isn't it possible that there could be amazing live sound technicians, so front of house sound techs that are horrible with organization and logistics? Like, is that possible where there's a guy that's like, no, like I just want to do front of house?
Absolutely, right? And that's there's a lot of guys out there that won't TM, right? And to be honest, like I've been back and forth for years on it too because it's a lot of work, which is fine. I'm not afraid of a lot of work and I'm afraid of hard work, but it can get a little overwhelming at times for the main reason of that you sometimes got to be in two places at once, sometimes three, right?
Ooh.
Because you got, someone that needs you over at the merch table to do some pricing, but your star's arriving, like your lead singer, but then you're at the console because you're putting your USB key in to get your file going to get your mix up and running, right? So that's where it can get difficult. I don't think the processes are that hard. Once you've got into it and you're doing it, it remains hard because of trying to be in multiple places at once, and it can get a little stressy, right?
Yeah, we need technology to advance to the point where we have cloning for you or we have teleportation, I think.
That and many people have said that. And it's like we need three of you, right? So yeah, that's the only thing that makes it hard and makes it stressful is the multiple places at once and just getting a little bit piled up, But yeah, as far as just to compartmentalize and just go to front of house, that's out of the job, like all the touring jobs, that's my home base and that's what I love the most, right? More so, let's say monitors, guitar teching, or TMing when I'm doing front of house, and I think that it's the reward out of the day. You know what I mean? That hour and a half, or half an hour, whatever long the set is, right? That is definitely the reward to have two, three, four, 10,000 people there that you're providing the sonic quality of that performance for having a good time. There's no feeling like that, especially if it's a band that you really dig. So I've been on bands that I like, and I've been on bands that I really like, right? So, of varying degrees, right? So when you're into a band and you're providing that service and everything's just firing all cylinders, it's a high. It's like a drug, and it's a wonderful feeling. And all that crazy hard work and running around all day is, definitely pays off at the end of the night.
Do you think with you being willing to be the tour manager as well as front of house that actually elevates you above other guys that just want to do front of house? Let's say all is equal as far as skill and whatever as a front of house, you can deliver the same goods, but one of them also can be the tour manager. Do you think that's an extra tool in the toolbox?
Absolutely. It's a really sought after position, especially right now after the pandemic, right? There's a lot of guys that decide not to tour manage because the world's really not quite back to normal. I do definitely I do find it more difficult to get things booked, like finding buses. I think with flights is a nightmare right now. So being able to do that right now is definitely a sought after position, and and I'll keep doing it. For definitely for the time being. Yeah, so it's definitely an asset. Is it, I find TMing is a bit of for me, it's a byproduct that I don't mind doing to get to work with that specific band. If that's what they need, yes, I will TM, and because I can, easily do it. But my number one, for sure, I'm passionate just to do front of house sound. If I can, at some point just end up doing that. And while I get into my last little twilight before retirement, if I ever retire, I'll end up probably just being a sound guy for like 10 years, right? And just kind of slow it down a bit.
How frequently do audience members come and talk to you at the sound booth, and whether whether they want to say it sounds awesome, or there's some idiot that's like, I can't hear the guitar, or the vocals are too quiet. How often does that happen, or does it not happen very frequently?
It's happened now and again, not too much, right? But definitely more, high fives after show when people are walking out, and I'm just cleaning up all my stuff and
Oh,
unplug.
that's good.
So that's a good thing, right? But you get the odd guy. It's just like, he was like, at the beer garden or something, right? That, and he's like, it sounds a little weird, and it's like, yeah, you want to get in front of the PA, or
And you're super inebriated, so
yeah,
between it's always someone that's like super schmammered that's
yeah,
has the best ears in the world and tells
yeah,
you.
exactly. Yeah, you're gonna get those people, and I'm pretty nice too. I just, you go, sorry, bud, no, I'll work on that. I was just turn around and have a good chuckle with the system tech or the lighting guy that's beside me, right? And just whatever, right? And just focus on my job. Sometimes I just don't even turn around. It's like someone go, "Hey, bud," right? And I'm working, like I am concentrating here. So yeah, it happens now and again. No skin off my back, that's for sure.
So after Platinum Blonde, in 2015, you went on to do front of house and tour manage with April Wine. Man, those guys have so many hits. Sign of the Gypsy Queen has always been like my jam. I know they have lots of great songs. How amazing is it working with that band, and how amazing are their harmonies live? Because recorded, they have incredible harmonies.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that was a fun little adventure with them for about 3 years. Yeah, it was great. They're legends, man. The Canadian legends, and yeah, like you said, like it's just a ton of hits. And honestly, I didn't even realize until I, got the job with them, and then listened through the catalog and getting a set list from Miles about, what their 90-minute set is going to look like or whatever, and then just listen to all the tunes. I'm like, holy cow! Like these guys had so many like deep hits from so many years. Like they just ruled the '70s, right? And it was definitely, they had a heyday there. And it's funny, Gypsy Queen was always one of my favorites to mix live. Miles always, it was near the end of the set, and he would always just, he sounded like the record on that, right? Which was cool. And that guy's, when I was with them, he's definitely still had it, right? Consummate pro, you know. So to do, TM in front of house for a band like that, where I was pretty early on in my years of doing front of house and TMing, So to get it on a band with that, it's been around for 45 years at the time. It's definitely an honor, and it taught me a lot. It was a really good circuit that they're on. They play all through the states a lot of festivals and casinos. So the gigs were really well put together. So it was awesome doing that gig. I definitely do sound for them anytime. That's for sure.
So you mentioned they had a great tour across North America. You, as you doing live sound, your career has taken you all around the world. Do you have any favorite places that you love to visit while on tour? Or any favorite places that you did visit while you were out there?
Yeah. Well, I haven't like I actually my first trip across the pond was that one recent with JJ Wild. But with all the other bands, like going through the states and stuff, I love getting to the southern states, right, and just getting into going down to Vegas and LA and just in the whole West Coast and back up into Canada. Like, I definitely love the coastal regions, that's for sure. BC's always been a favorite. So anytime that we're just doing a one-off in BC or going through there, it's like I love it, especially if we get a couple extra days or something like any of the coastal stuff, right? And going into Halifax and doing any of those festivals as well, right? I love the East Coast people. I've gained a lot of good friends on the East Coast from touring, and I love going back. It feels like home. I think it's in my blood a little bit because my mom's she was born in Dartmouth, right? So she's from Nova Scotia. So I definitely love the coastal regions for sure.
And you mentioned it was a 3-year stint with April Wine. Do you prefer being with a crew for a long period of time, multiple years, or do you prefer doing several, just these 3 months or 6 months, so you're able to do it for there's like a variety of artists or bands you're working with? Do you have a preference there?
What's funny that you asked me that question because I'm in the middle of trying to really figure that out. Because I've done both, right? I've committed to bands for years, and then I've gone out and just, it's like with the guys from the Trues, right? Like I said, look, I'm available this summer, which was 2018, I guess, right? So I can do your whole summer, right? Don't know what I'm doing after that, right? And I ended up starting working with Big Rec after. But I kind of enjoy that, like it's doing little stints with bands, right? And it keeps it fresh for me, and it keeps me on my toes. I feel for front of house, because I'm always trying to prove myself, right? So yeah, there's merits to both sides. It's almost a question I don't know if I'm gonna be able to answer for you because like I'm trying to figure it out. Like I like both ends of the spectrum there. Committing with the band and getting deep in, like it was with Big Rec over since 2019 up until recently was great. But this summer, I see with JJ Wild, but done a few monster truck gigs, right? And they've been quite enjoyable, and I kind of like it, the ping ponging around a little bit. So maybe I'll settle at some point. We'll see where the cards fall, right?
So in 2017, you started working with I Mother Earth and Finger 11, front of house tour manager.
Yeah.
And so you worked with each of them individually, but then also together when they were on tour?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it actually all came to be where I got a job at the Phoenix Concert Theater, being like a head audio and production manager.
That's Toronto?
Yeah, in Toronto, the Phoenix. Yeah. So from that, I ended up that was Zeke Myers, a longtime acquaintance that was working with Our Mother Earth and Finger 11 both on the management team, and he asked if I would start doing some gigs with both bands. Absolutely. Like those are two bands when I was on the circuit with like Clarknova that we play with and that I admired, right? Because they're on that upper level, right? And I'm like, okay, that's where we got to get to. And these guys are great, and
That's such a great double bill, right?
yeah.
Like such energetic concerts.
Oh, well, for sure. Yeah, it was so yeah, a bunch of individual shows, and then the tour got announced, and so I was head TM for that. So I was tour managing both bands technically, but just doing sound for Finger 11 because I felt I went to management. It was only about 4 weeks out of the tour, and I'm like, I don't think I can do sound for both bands and TM this. I think I'm gonna fail. I'm just gonna fall flat on my face because it's like it'll be pouring in like 5, 6, 8 different directions, right? So we ended up bringing in Todd Cutler, who's amazing TM in front of house guy, and he helped production manage and he did sound for I Mother Earth, and it was a godsend for me just to help level me out because it was a pretty stressful run. Like two buses, two different crews, two bands. I'm kind of heading that all up, and I honestly, it's just like that one. When I was done, I was like, okay, that's too much. I'm not going to do that again. Like I survived, but not unscathed, but I survived, and just realized that was too much. But I thoroughly enjoyed myself. Fond memories of that tour. We had a kick-ass crew. Both crews were amazing. We all worked together to make that happen. It was a really neat, fun tour to do for sure.
So I have a quote here from Rich Bedeau, who was the drummer for Finger Eleven on four of their most iconic albums, and he started Saint Asonia with Adam Gonche of 3 Days Grace, so he played on their debut album. So this is what Rich has to say. He says, Dan Preston is a total pro. Every band that has ever worked with him never wants to let him go. His reputation has made him sought after in this business. I've heard his mixes for years and he's incredible. You're a lucky band if you have Dan rolling with you. Not only is he top royalty in the crew department in Canada, but he is also a rock star himself. He won't tell you that, and he'll make you find it out for yourself because he's that kind of guy. I've never had the honor of sharing a tour bus with that guy, but I really hope I get the chance someday. Cheers, Dan. Hope to see you soon. So that's Rich Bedeau.
Oh, thanks for the nice, kind words there, Rich. Yeah, my tenure with Finger 11 was after Rich wasn't in the band anymore, which is unfortunate. But when I was doing Clarknova back in the day, actually before I was in the band, and I was just teching, so I was just doing sound for them. So the Greatest of Blue Skies Southern Ontario run, Clarknova was opening, and handpicked for that. And so I was their sound guy, right? So had a couple of yeah, actually, he's wrong. We hung on a bus one night. We were on their bus out of like the 5 or 6 shows that we did in Southern Ontario. So we did hang on a bus there, buddy, and probably will again at some point. But yeah, super nice guy, great drummer. I wish that I had a chance to work with him, but just kind of kept in touch through Facebook. That's what social media is amazing for that. Just over the years, so I appreciate that. And yeah, can I tell a funny Rich story?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Quick one. So that night that we were hanging out in the bus, we're all just sitting there, and all of a sudden, we're like, what is that smell? It's like that. Oh man, that really smells like dog do. Like that's not someone relieving themselves or something. That is definitely dog do. And we're looking around that bus, and everybody's still trying to have a good time, right? And finally, Rich sits down on the bus and he gets his leg up like this. That and his whole his sneaker just caked and dog crap, right?
He was the carrier.
He was the carrier. He felt so bad. It was so funny, right? So we're Febreze in the bus, and he's outside scrubbing his shoe off.
You needed a flamethrower for that shoe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was a funny story because it was like an hour, just like we're looking everywhere, like and yeah. So he was the culprit. So there's my funny little Rich story.
That's
Sorry.
what the people want, man. We're giving the people what they want.
Yeah.
If some of our listeners are at the very beginning stages of wanting a live sound career in the music industry, do you have any advice for them? Is there any tips on how to make a name for themselves?
Yeah, well, obviously you got to go, gain skills somewhere. So there's a couple of different options. An option I chose, and this is a long time ago, and things have changed a little bit, was like much like yourself, going to school for it. So I went to Recording Arts Program Canada, and at the time it was located outside of Hamilton, Stony Creek, and they had it was actually just an old house on a big property that we converted into. They had 3 studios and a Pro Tools suite and 2 analog studios at the time with Neems and 2-inch tape machines, right? So I got the real world old school analog, cutting tape and splicing, education, and a little bit of Pro Tools to start it too, because at that time, Pro Tools was just, and the DAWs were just kind of starting to be the norm. So I find like I don't know if I do the whole huge course like over multiple years and that, but I think it's important to get online. YouTube has a lot to offer, and if you can sift through a lot of noise and find some online courses, that's a good way to do it because it's at your own pace, and you can put in a 12-hour day or a 2-hour day or whatever and start learning all the stuff. So getting those fundamentals are key. And then really it's just finding a low end job in the industry, like going to work for a production company and honestly pushing cases, right? Because those cases have, some really cool, awesome electronics and speakers in them. And they get opened up at shows and you can check it all out and ask guys questions. And that's the thing is questions, 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 and seek that knowledge. Excuse me. So if you end up working with some good guys, right, you can get a good little foundation of what it takes, to put on a show, and know how to use that gear, right? And then it's just, it takes so much time. It's like learning an instrument. I really, equate them both as the same, and I can because I do both, and relatively around the same level. I'm a little better sound guy than I think guitarists these days, but I digress. Yeah, it's just putting that time in, right, and seeking that knowledge, right, and then as time goes on, you get better and better. It's just networking, getting online, getting your resume out there. Once you've worked for a production company or two, and just go and list all of the gear that and what you're studying, what you're doing, giving you a little update. And a lot of guys actually too will go to bands that are their age or their friends. Like a lot of sound guys start with, much like I did, they're working with their friends as a sound guy, and kind of learn the ropes and kind of coming up with them, right? And they just end up, learning sound as band is like kind of honing their craft and just starting their career, right? That happens a lot too. So if you can get in with a band, right? If you can, once you got your basic skills and know how to use the mixing console and effects, if you can get in with a band, that's always a good way to go too.
That's all great advice. In late 2018, you start to work as a monitor tech for 3 Days Grace, including a tour with Disturbed. I actually saw this tour in Toronto. Can you share any stories about that period of time? Anything cool that happened? Anything behind the scenes? What it's like working with 3 Days Grace? Anything about Disturbed? I've seen 3 Days Grace a ton of times. I just saw them at Blues Fest here in Ottawa recently, like I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And Disturb, what stands out to me is their singer. David just oozes this like power. It's crazy. Like when he's on stage, it's not just how powerful his vocal is, but it's like his presence. It's like the way he moves is like slow and powerful. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's what comes to me.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I saw, little snippets of the show every night, so that makes a lot of sense. He's got like, all the confidence in the world, and he's a skilled guy, right? Especially on that tour where, they were putting a lot out there. It was a big tour. The stage was super, super cool. It was like a big arrow. Actually had different tiers, right, all the way down to the floor, and then a huge crescent video screen all in behind them, right? So the production was awesome, and there was a lot of fire. There was a ton of fire, and it was neat what they were doing too. Like, it wasn't just flame pots. They'd have stuff that would drop because their truss was triangular over the stage too. So they had basically rope that would drop, like kerosene rope, and that would actually light on fire too, right? So it almost just looked like there was just like the stage was on in like uncontrolled flames, right? So really cool spectacle. And all the guys were great to hang out with. Dan Dunnigan, the guitar player, every single day. I don't think there was a day that he didn't. Every day when I was in monitors, he'd be coming through because they were getting ready to do their sound check as I was setting up the monitor desk for 3 Days Grace, right? And he'd always come over and chat with me for a couple minutes, right? And see if he got up to anything the night before, if it was, the old roadie Friday the night before, like the day off kind of thing. Like
He's a great guitarist.
he's a great player. Yeah, he's really good. Getting to see him in sound checks and then nightly, just how solid of a player and how the way he riffs is like super unique. You wouldn't think of it because Disturbed, they're just like just big, powerful. It seemed like those straight ahead like metal riffs and that, but there's a really neat little twist edge to them when you really get listening to them and watch him play. Right, he's a great player. Yeah, the band's all really good. They're definitely really good at what they do. And that tour was great. I can't say anything bad about it other than, just a couple of late nights and early mornings, which naturally happens on tours, so a little tired here and there. But otherwise, working for the 3 Days Grace guys was awesome. They treated me great. A lot of respect there, a lot of fun guys. They're very, very thankful, just like a lot of other bands are of 20 years of being able to do this and then some, and keep producing number one hits. I think when we were on the road, actually that January, yeah, I think they announced their 14th number one song, I guess, in the US.
They just announced their 17th. So the new
Yeah,
album has produced three more number ones, and they
yeah,
have of all time on Billboard Rock. So it's like modern rock or alternative rock or whatever those charts are for rock.
yeah.
There's no band that has more number one singles than 3 Days Grace, period. And you think of like, Stained and Shine Down and Godsmack. Like you think of the biggest of the big over the last 20 plus years, and none of them have produced more than 3 Days Grace, which is crazy.
It's kind of nuts to think about, right? Especially like when I was on that tour and they got the number 14. They had just surpassed, I think it was Van Halen, right? So it's like, so it makes you think, it's like, holy jumping, right? And then now that it's 17, it's what an accomplishment from a bunch of kids from Norwood, Ontario, right? you
Yeah,
know,
if a band has one number
yeah,
one hit, if you have like a top 10 hit, it's a big deal. So
yeah,
having one number one hit is insane. And
yeah.
having three is incredible, but 17, like that's a full-length album is 10 or 12 songs. So they have like an album and a half worth of number one hits. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's quite ridiculous. Like, yeah, every record spawns like three number ones, right? And
Like,
so,
can't they leave some space for other bands to have number ones?
yeah, they're being hogs, eh? I think they're quite fine with it too.
They're okay with it. So after 3 Days Grace and Disturbed, summer of 2019, this is just pre-pandemic. You end up on tour with the Trues. So you mentioned this already. Um, somehow I've seen those guys probably 10 times live. There was a period of time where they were on tour with, I'm a fan. I've owned several of their albums. They were on tour with other bands that I loved constantly. So they're on tour with Matt Mays. They were on tour with Sam Roberts. And I just like every time I went to see a band I liked, the Trues were a part of that. And I've gone to see just them alone. Those guys can play guitar and they bring the rock and roll to every show.
Those guys have a great repertoire of songs and a great set. It's a really, really fun show, right? And the cool thing about them, like they love working, they love touring. They'll go into all the little smaller markets and stuff too, right? So they hit all the little pockets, right? Where it's not just in the Toronto, Winnipeg, Saskatoon. They do all little small towns too, right? And they do big shows and small shows, right? They just want to work. And yeah, they were great to work for. Really nice guys, and great crew. I was with a guy named Josh McIntosh and Rob Metzler's been with them for 15 years. Monitor Tech, and one of the best guys out there. So yeah, it was really fun to work with those guys. Right, it was just so happened that, like when I was stopped working with 3 Days Grace. It's just like that summer looked like I need some holes to fill. I was working, but I just had some holes to fill and just contacted. I think it was through management, just through acquaintance or contact, and yeah, and they needed a guy at the time, so it was a lot of fun to go out with them. Appreciated the work a lot at the time. So
And their music and their songs are very conducive to the live atmosphere. So it translates well because it's songs that pump you up and people want to be a part of.
oh, for sure. Yeah, their set's a party for sure, right? It's definitely, and I think they've been like that since day one, because I saw them back in the day too, a few times, like working Canadian Music Week. I think they were actually opening up for, it was 3 Days Grace and Thornley, and then the Trues were on, I think it was actually 3 Days Grace first, to be honest, and then the Trues. So right from day one, I was like, oh, this is a party band, right? That's when then they had like Not Ready to Go, they closed with it, and the song was on the radio, so people were already singing it too. I'm like, yeah, these guys are going. It was just at the very start, so it's cool, kind of full circle down the line, come working with them again, right? So
So in preparation for this interview, I went on Facebook and I joined the fan groups for all the bands that you've worked with.
right.
I got in there to see what questions they'd want me to ask to get some inside scoops. And we have a question coming from the official Trues Fans Network. So this is a big fan group for the Trues on Facebook. So this is from Jeanette Brissett Condon. She says, you must be ecstatic to be on the road again. Any venues you prefer doing sound in now that you've been to quite a few, and any challenges you face technically? So it's kind of wide open, but any challenges you face?
Yeah, well, it's a different ball game every night, right? Depending on the venue. Some venues are similar. When you're doing a soft seater run, like in theaters, right? It's got its challenges, but if you're doing those every night, with your digital console, it can kind of remain fairly the same. So it gets, a little easier and stuff. But, I really like doing theaters because it's a nice close feeling and everything seems controlled. But my all-time favorite is just open air festivals. You got a nice big PA. There's 20,000 people there. It's a nice big flat field, and the sound just goes, and it's not bouncing off of things like in an arena or at a theater or a club, right? Um, so yeah, the open air festivals are just so much fun. And it's not even just the way it's sounding; it's the environment. Like you're outside and the sun's shining. Not all the time. Sometimes you get the rain that can get a little crappy, but yeah, man, those summer festivals are where it's at for me for sound, just that vibe overall.
Recently, I saw a concert in a glass building. So it's like it would be a nightmare for you. Like just me saying that, it's like nails across a chalkboard. So it's this this little town had a great band called The Commotion that were playing, and normally in that building it's like a farmer's market or something, and so it's 100% glass. And yeah, how much of a nightmare is that for a sound guy? Like everything's reflective. It's
It's
tough.
yeah. The key to that is just keeping your volume as low as
The
possible.
key to that is to not do a show in that
Yeah,
venue.
there you go. Key is to say no. But yeah, if you're in an environment like that, yeah, it's just keeping like get the musicians to, either turn the amps around or hopefully they're going direct, through a modeling amp or something like that, and if you can plexi shield in the drums or something, like that. Because that's any rock band, just forward facing amps, live drums and stuff. That's a nightmare. So you're basically just trying to get a little body in there with the subs and make sure the vocals are on top, right, and try to balance it out. It's more of the sound reinforcement than just being a mixer, right? You're getting your stage level, right? That you're getting off the band, off the stage, and then you're just kind of mixing the elements that are missing, like the like kick drum and the vocal, and just trying to balance that out and keep it as low as possible.
How much do bodies absorb sound? So I guess the question is, let's say you're doing sound, I you're doing sound, it's a 10,000 person venue, and one night there's 10,000 people and one night only 1,000 people show up. How much do those bodies actually absorb sound? And do you actually have to raise the volume on a night where there's more bodies? I guess it's just a random question that I've thought of before.
Yeah, absolutely. And the answer is drastically. It can
Oh
change
wow.
everything, especially depending on the environment. They can go back to talking about theaters. Theaters aren't as bad because all the seats are there and they're normally cushioned, right? So you're getting like the core sound of that the theater is there, right? And the bodies are going to change it a little bit. But when you get into an arena, it can change drastically, right? Because there's the
With the
thing is,
floor?
yeah, mainly the floor for me, because when you get the PA, it is in the air, and you're going to get those reflections anyway, because it's normally off the roof and off the back wall and all that. But I really find it changed the low end response because even though low end travels a little more strongly than those upper frequencies, it's just when you got those subs and they're just piling at you, and there's nobody on the floor, and it's just concrete, you're getting those reflections. And you bring all those people. So number one, it's an obstacle. It's got to go around, and what it's doing, and it's softening all those reflections those multiple reflections off of that concrete floor, right? So your low end can really change. So you know, you got to be really careful with that. But yeah, it's just it can change it drastically. I find you know, that's why when I get into a sound check into arena, you know, I'll do certain things. I do a lot of stuff on headphones, checking individual sources, make sure things are okay. Main thing is ringing out your live vocals, so any backup and main vocal mics to make sure that they're rock solid and that they're not going to screech on you and that they're up and over top. And then it's just making sure that all of your elements are there and not going too crazy on sound check and killing your mix. Because I've gotten to, you know, back in the day, I'd overcorrect and over mix during my sound checks, and I learned pretty quickly that just if you had a good show on this file, you know, the night before in the arena, don't go too crazy. Just wait till the people get here, and just to make sure that your sources are not going to feedback and that they're there and rock solid. And then, you know, it's that first 30 seconds, crazy busy, right? You'll see if, you know, for any listeners out there that aren't sound guys and stuff, you watch any guy in the first song of any band, you know, I don't care if it's Coldplay or U2 and like high level, right? They're busy, you know, those first, especially the first 30 seconds and first couple of minutes. So they're correcting, and boom, like their mix is in place, and then the show rolls from there.
So in the fall of 2019 until the spring of 2022, you worked with Big Rec.
Mhm.
And so it's like a pandemic sandwich with Big Rec. So just in between those two, there was the pandemic. You know, the pandemic like decimated the live event industry. How much did that affect you? And how were you able to kind of adapt to what was going on during that period?
How much time we got left? We got another 2 hours.
Yeah, I guess the rapid fire through.
Yeah. Yeah. So just yeah, big rec for a sec. Yeah, I got working with them. A colleague, Andrew Brown, Slipper. He couldn't do their tour. He had some commitments with some other artists, so he asked me to do that gig. So it was a 3 month tour. I took it gladly. Always been a fan of Big Rec and being a guitar player, like, you know, in Canada, a guitar player, like who doesn't, you know, worship Ian Thornley, right? And is playing like this guy's just insane. He's an alien. So gladly took that gig, did the tour. I gotta say, like that was probably the most memorable tour that I've done. Never any real specific events, but just the surroundings, like the band themselves, the show themselves, the crew, best crew I've ever worked with. Shaner, Kirby, and Kai. The four of us just went and I think that we absolutely killed it. Green and the gang on that tour. But then yeah, you know, shortly after that, months, boom, pandemic, right? And we're all at home. Yeah, that was a hard one to take, you know, because it's just like all these years of doing this little climb and finally working with, you know, the bands that I'm, you know, not that I didn't enjoy bands prior, but you know, Big Rec really struck a chord with me. Just you know, the songwriting and the guitar sounds and just you know how Ian is so into every aspect of you know live show and you know his recordings and how things are sounding up front, right? And just you know, so I was working with the perfect band they should be working with, and then just when this pandemic hits. So we luckily got through with some of the drive-in shows. Management got right on that. So that summer we did have about 5 or 6 shows and some short little drive-in runs.
This is still with Big Rec?
Yeah, still with Big
Okay.
Rec. Yeah, so that summer of 2020, you know, a couple of drive-in shows, and then we did more of that the next year. We were doing like we actually had a couple of tour bus runs, but we were so isolated. Like we, you know, management's like, okay, you can't go to a restaurant. You know, well, not much was open anyway during that summer, but there's a couple places you go in and get takeout, and it's like, no, we're getting food delivered to the bus, and really we were in masks the whole summer. You know, so it really changed like the environment and that the freedom that we felt. You know, that we never thought would go away. You know, I honestly thought like this is why I really got into live sound. You know, after I did the studio thing because it was it's like live sound will never go away. Like you know, with studios where people having home studios and that, like it might like the you know from back in the day when I was doing it until you know like 10 years ago. So many people started having studios at home and going that route. So I'm like, okay, that's drying up a little bit. I got it back in the live sound thing, and okay, this is never going to go away. Well, I was dead wrong. That's for sure. So we got through doing the driving stuff for those 2 summers. In 21, it was so definitely starting to open up quite a bit more. And then we started touring normally, quite normally in the just before Christmas of 2021. Took a little break, and then we went out on another run in the spring. That was probably a little bit longer. It was about 3 weeks across Canada. And then a bunch of us actually got COVID on that run. So that tour got cut short, 2 or 3 shows short. So we all went home a little bummed. It was probably for me, probably the lowest point of touring I think I've ever had in my life. Because we're just getting back to it. I'm trying to find my way of being content with what was going on and trying to play by the rules a little bit, and then still get kind of burnt by it, and and just getting used to touring again. Because it was just home for like 2 years, right? So honestly, during that run, I had a bit of a hard time during that one and getting used to it, and again. And getting COVID, getting really sick, and it really hit me bad. The guys thought I was dead in my bunk. Yeah, I think I didn't get out of my bunk for 36 hours, dead heading home from out west. So it's definitely, there's been some definite real effects to it, and while trying to get back to normal. That led me to take a little break from Big Rec. They went on a U.S. run, and got Charlie Ferguson back, who's their like OG original sound tech. We got to talk about Charlie for a sec, because the guy's legend, and it was a pleasure to see that. Me having to take a break to have Charlie back in with the guys. Like who could you ask for better than the original, guy out on those original, tours, right? For memory of and pleasure and the greed. So wonderful to see him back with them. They're in amazing hands, and during that time too is when I got that offer for JJ Wild, right? And ended up starting something new here.
So someone that can vouch for your time with Big Rec is their drummer, Sekou Lumumba.
Right.
He says, Dan is the man. I love his mixing as he mixes us very drum heavy, and he's a great hang. He has a great temperament for babysitting grown children while still doing a really incredible job as front of house and tour manager. Love that guy, and I hope to get to work with him again soon. From Sekou.
Yeah, I think he said that similar or the exact same quote in his podcast there. It was really nice to hear that. I miss those guys, they're out doing their thing, and I'm doing my thing. They're buddies, right? And I always will be. And it's very nice to hear those kind words. It's crazy hearing all this nice stuff. I don't feel like I'm not nice of a guy, but I guess I am.
It's we all struggle to accept the compliments and the kind words, but
Oh yeah.
sometimes it's good to hear some nice words.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's great. Yeah.
So
Awesome.
you mentioned from Big Rec, you got an opportunity to work with JJ Wild. So that's the summer of 2022. So that's now. We made it all the way from the beginning, from a kid, hearing Queen at 3 years old, all the way to JJ Wild. So I have some words here from the record label. So this is Ian Stanger from Black Box Music. He says Dan is a good dude who's really helped bring JJ Wild's live sound to a new level. So just because you're having trouble handling all the compliments, I thought I would give one final one to lay it on thick.
Yeah, cool. He's just nice and straight to the point. That's what Ian does. He's like I work super hard for the band, right? Management team, the same management as Glorious Sons. Right. So yeah,
they tour a lot together, right? Those two,
right? It's the same label, and it makes sense. And the bands work really well together. As far as like just the sound, and then the people, right? Like the actual band members, right? They're all good buddies. The Glorious Sun guys love the JJ Wild guys, right? And vice versa. So yeah, it's cool. So thank Ian for that, and I'm glad that he's happy with what's going on. And I definitely feel the same. That I bring a little bit of lineage and stuff to a band that's on the rise, an artist that's on the rise, and getting front of house sound together for them while they're going through these paces and stuff, and things are happening is great. I've never had a chance to to work with a band like on this level where basically it's just there's a couple of records out and they're just on that the level where things are happening and just kind of climbing that ladder. And we'll just say a young band, right? All the bands I've worked with are my age or maybe even older and kind of in mid or later of their career. So this is a really interesting time right now. It gets me to work with a band and kind of in a way mentor them once we get ingrained. I'm only about 2 months in with them, so they've only really they've just seen me as a TM and a front of house guy and really trying to pull these tours together. I kind of came in as a Hail Mary like a couple of weeks before the tour happened, so it'll be neat. Now we got a break and we're planning a fall tour, and that's when really the skill level and the knowledge can come out and we can start passing that along and working with them. And and they got a really good head for the business. They all do too, and they're all really excited. So it's going to be a nice meshing of knowledge and excitement and stuff over the coming months and into the next year, and just see where it all goes.
You can feel the momentum that's building with JJ Wild. You can feel that there's something there, something's growing. And you're saying that this upcoming tour, this is her first headline tour, correct?
This will be, yeah. She's doing, I guess, it's a 2 week tour, end of October, and then some more local Ontario dates in November. So we elongates out a little bit. So it's a bit of a shorter run, but it's her first actual headline run. And she's bringing out Billy Rafool, she's been doing some writing with, and released a single with last year. So it's going to have that family atmosphere as well, with Billy and his band. So yeah, it should be a great run. They're all really excited, about it. To get on a headline run, that's a big step, even though it's going to be, smaller venues than we did with Glorious Sons, right? It's just going to be an hour and 15, hour and a half sets every night, and and up the production, a little bit. So I'm bringing a little lighting package and little doodads and that, and really make a show out of it, right?
And it's mostly her fans. When you're opening, it's like you're a smaller percentage of the fans. So there's lots of perks to being the headliner.
Absolutely, right? So they're going to feed off of that hype too, because they're going to be there for for them, right? And it's definitely going to feed back into their performance. I think it's going to go really well. Lots of planning to do. That all starts basically, this week, taking a couple of days, to clear the brain a little bit. This weekend, I'm actually going with Monster Truck this weekend for a one-off. So go do that gig and then right into some tour prep. So
that's your time off is doing a badass show with Monster Truck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it'll be a fun little one. It's up in Bala. I think it's called Summerfest. It's like right on a lake up in Bala. Actually did the same show with them last year. I do some one-offs for them once in a while. I love those guys. They're so easy and so fun to work for. And mixing them is like it's like that. I call it the hockey stick mix, right? It's everything just up and it's a nice little balance, and let them do what they're gonna do, because what they do is great. It's just pedal to metal rock and roll. I absolutely love those guys. So yeah, with them.
I watched some of your updates from your tour with JJ Wild. Lots of cool stuff going on. Would you say the highlight was that show with Kiss in France? It was like the Coliseum. It looked insane. What to give us some inside scoop of what that was?
Yeah, it was down in Nimes in southern France. It was extremely hot that day. I'll just put that there. Yeah, so it's one of the oldest ancient Roman Colosseums still in existence. And so to just let alone the venue and seeing the venue, okay, that's really cool, right? Then it's you're on a show, direct support for Kiss, right? And it's in France, and it's like all these levels of coolness, right? So that was quite the experience. We were really lucky that day that I know a couple of the actually one in particular, crew members for Kiss. Buddy of mine, TJ's incredible guitar tech, amazing human being, and he just got the guitar tech job for Paul Stanley. So I was able to go in that day and meet up with TJ. He took me around and introduced me to all the guys, production manager, monitor guys, stage techs, everybody, front of house tech. So it made our day really nice and smooth, right? So that was a pleasure, because normally, when you're in a kind of a band that someone like Kiss, and it's they're an unknown band, right? Opening, they're not really gonna and their crew are not going to give you really that much time a day, and they did. They gave us all the time that we really particularly needed. A little cut short on our sound check, but we made it through. We got the bulk of the time that we needed for the day. But yeah, what a crazy show! Like basically staying there after the show, took all the guys from JJ Band all up front. We watched the whole Kiss show, and we're just sitting there, and it's like we're in France. We're at this ancient Coliseum, and there's Kiss on a relatively small stage for them, too. So it seemed a little bit more intimate, right? And really interesting sound in there too, right? So yeah, it was a really super unique, like bucket listy type day. Like, yeah, I think that was definitely the topper of the last couple of months.
And you guys even got a picture with the band, right?
Yeah, their security treated us great all day too. Yeah, he got us in there afterwards. We were kind of just like, oh, we don't want to kind of intrude on him or whatever. Just leave that time for the VIP. Just like get in there, right? So yeah, grabbed everybody and got a quick little shot with them, and said thanks to all the guys and for letting us do our thing, and yeah, and that was that. Yeah, very very cool.
The last thing that I wanted to chip in about JJ Wild is so in 2021 she wins the Juno for Rock Album of the Year, which
Yeah,
is awesome. And what a lot of people don't know is she's the first female artist in 25 years to win Best Rock Album. That's a genre that's, mostly male, unfortunately. First artist in 25 years, the last female to win Best Rock Album at the Junos, Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill, literally like the biggest female album of all time.
yeah.
So, there's her and Alanis that have that award that bookend all the guys for 25 years in between. How insane is that? That's such a cool
I'm
piece
sure.
of history.
I'm sure daily she's blown away by that accolade, right? She's very very thankful for everything that's going on, and and everything that's going to be going on, and how the everything looks going into the future, right? So I know it was a bit of a bummer, like for them to hit that in 2020 and not be able to tour it. So that was probably the only down thing about it. But to have that accolade, like that never goes away, right? And that is something that's a staple in her career, and that's going to propel her to everything else that she's going to be doing. So yeah, it's a huge accolade and well deserved, right? It's just she's super super talented. She's a great singer, great show person. She's got a great band behind her. Sorry, and yeah, things look very very good and promising.
So as we wrap up, I like to do a rapid fire question section, giving the fans what they want. Are you good if we just blast through a bunch of questions quickly, quick answers, and then we wrap it all up with a bow? Is that okay?
I'll try. I normally need some time, but let's just try.
We'll see. This could be the most entertaining part of the interview, just a total crash and burn. So uh so here we go. What would you be doing if you didn't become a sound tech or a musician?
Drug dealer.
This is already the best rapid fire questions we've ever done. What would you change about live sound and touring if you could? There's got to be some stuff you don't like about it.
Time travel.
Time travel. We already answered this one from a fan question. What's the biggest show you've ever done sound for?
Let's see, Canada Day with Platinum Blonde 2013. There's 22,000 people there. Yeah.
What's it like doing sound with a crowd that big?
Well, I was on stage doing monitors, right? So I got to look out and get their whole reaction to it, and they were just, they were on fire, right? So loving it. So it was really cool to see all that.
That might be a better spot to be able to look out and see the whole
Yeah,
crowd instead of being separated in the middle.
exactly. Yeah, it was cool. It was a cool day.
Which band were you the biggest fan of before working with them?
Uh, Toss up, Big Rack, Figure 11. I don't know. Probably, yeah. I'm just gonna say both of them. I love all the bands I worked with, but those two stand out to me.
We've talked about your favorite artists, your favorite albums. Do you have any guilty pleasures? Like, I like Nickelback, I like Taylor Swift, I call her Tay Tay. Anything embarrassing that you enjoy listening to?
Yeah, I guess you know what, I don't mind Nickelback. I know they get hated on a lot, but geez, man, like right, big old catchy rock tunes, and they're good and they're well produced and put on a great show. But guess guilty pleasure. It's like I think Jewel is amazing
Nice.
songwriter, and I've back when she first came out, I listened to the first record like a lot, and think she's an amazing songwriter. I love
What
her
is
voice.
it? Pieces of Me or Pieces of You or
Yeah,
something?
piece of you. Yeah,
I own that album. I'm just gonna help you out to not feel so bad. I own that. Yeah.
it's that whole folk thing, and just just a super unique voice, right?
Are there any new artists that deserve more attention?
Let me think here. It's funny because I'm getting so old school, and I just find myself just listening to all the stuff I grew up on more so nowadays. But let me think. I'm a big metalhead, and I think my favorite metal band right now is Gojira, but a lot of people are listening now. But I think just under the radar a little bit is Band of True with 3 Days Grace, a band called Nothing More. I think anybody who's a fan of energetic metal has got to check them out. They write a really unique song. The singer Johnny has got a really unique voice, and he's totally ripped in shape. And their stage show is incredible. They have like machines and stuff that kind of pop up out of nowhere, and with synth and these triggers on them. Yeah, really super cool band, super talented guys, super tight. Their crew is incredible.
That last Gojira album, so that's I think 2021.
Yeah,
That album is so good. So I wasn't I knew of the band, like it's a band where you know the name, but hadn't really known their music. That album sounds so incredible. Like sonically,
yeah,
that is a monster sounding album. And I think they at least got nominated, if not won a Grammy for it as well. So
yeah.
the industry acknowledged it as well.
And rightfully so, because that album does sound incredible. The writing's great. The guitars are punishing. The drum sounds are amazing. So another brother team like Van Halen, right? Like a singer and drummer kind of
Oh,
thing.
I didn't know that. Two brothers.
They're brothers, and yeah, the Planter brothers, yeah, and they're yeah. That's all I can say about that. They're pretty much as out of metal. Like right now, they're the band that's on the cusp of not cusp, or the band that's hitting greatness right now and really hitting their stride. They're amazing.
What are the top misconceptions that people have about audio engineers or sound techs?
We're all grumpy. Like the grumpy sound tech guys that don't talk to the sound tech guy.
You're not a grumpy cat?
No, not really. I'm actually a pretty nice guy. I got a lot of patience, but then it kind of crosses that line. Then it's not good. But it's just yeah. But that is a common thing. Like it's just like yeah, don't talk to the techs. They're too busy. They're grumpy because they're overworked and stuff like that. It's just it's just whatever. You get the odd guy, but that's anybody.
Everyone has an off night, and especially if you're on the road for months, it's like
That's the thing.
you're not at home, you're probably not eating that healthy, you're up late, some people have to lug a ton of heavy equipment, so yeah,
Yeah.
there's some room in there to have a bad day.
And I think that's why we end up getting, that outlook, because it's a really long day, right? And it's just like, guys, after the show, he just wants to go and maybe just have a shower and get in his bunk, and he's got to get up at 7 a.m., and set up the, and be out and lead the PA or whatever, So, yep.
What's the best advice you ever received?
Um, let's see, advice that I've ever received. There's a lot. But I think when I was really, really young, it's something that just sticks out. And so when I was really young and I was jamming, I think I skipped school that day, jamming with the drummer. I was in grade 9, and my uncle came over, and he gave us a beer each, underage. And we sat there and had a beer. And he's like, you know what, guys? Like, if this is what you're going to do, just remember that you have a ton of time, but not a second to waste. And it always kind of stuck with me, right? It's just like, this is what you're going to do, Yeah, it's going to take time, and you have a lot of time, but just really don't waste any of it, right? Because it takes that long, and it takes that much work.
That's a good quote. I've never heard that one. What is your $1 million idea that nobody takes seriously?
Oh my. Can I answer this? I don't know. I don't even know if I have one, buddy.
That's okay.
Let me just think for a second here. I think
Just
I've had like some guitar device or something in my brain before, but yeah, just I think actually I thought of like the the smart tuners before they even come out. But I think I don't even can't think of anything off the
The
top of my
smart tuners, is that where the guitar like tunes itself, where it
yeah.
actually changes?
Yeah, you just put it onto the machine head and you just set it for what you need it tuned to. You hit the string, goes wow, and then tunes it up.
The future is now. That's awesome. Did you ever get to a point where you seriously considered quitting music forever?
No, I don't think so at any one point. Maybe aspects, like I obviously got to a point where it's like maybe I'm not going to do the band thing, right? And I got into recording and that, but never the whole thing as a whole. I can't think of one time that I was just like, I've been down on it before, like, just like say the Clarknova thing when it got to the end of it, right? And it's just like when we, the label kind of fizzled and we became not a band anymore. It was just like kind of a drag. But then, hey, 3 weeks later, I started a new band, right? So there's been like the peaks and valleys, but never a rock bottom where obviously where I said, after this, I'm out. Never.
If you could sit down for a conversation with anybody, who would it be?
Dead or alive?
Dead or alive?
Randy Rhodes.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I could have predicted that one. What are the things outside of music that bring you joy?
My family and friends, just the simple things, hanging out. I love getting away, like doing the whole cottage thing, even if I can do a little bit of that at home. Like having a nice campfire and just hanging out by the pool, friends over barbecue, simple stuff, right? And just talk about other old stories about what we're planning on in the future, with friends and that, all together. I'm a pretty simple guy outside of music. I find music and what I do is really consuming, right? So just I don't have a lot of hobbies. My hobby is playing guitar, so it's really don't even consider it a hobby. It's just what I do. It's just outside of that, it's just hanging out. Family, friends.
Does your daughter think you're a rock star, or are you just some schmuck at home?
Yeah, I'm just some schmuck now at this point. She's 13. I'm not cool anymore.
Are you into books or video games? And if so, do you have a favorite in any of those categories?
Yeah. So I don't play video games at all anymore. I used to play quite a bit when I was in my teens and 20s and stuff. It's the thing to do. I guess favorite of that time. I'm trying to think. I really like the driving games, like Need for Speed, and it had the wheel, and the gas pedal, all that, man.
Oh, you were hardcore.
Oh yeah, I had all that. So that was a ton of fun. And then the adventure games and stuff like Tomb Raider. If you remember that, like from Sony, like the PlayStation 1 and all that,
Classics.
Yeah, it's funny going back and looking at those now, and it's like the graphics.
It's like one pixel that's like moving. There's like a brown pixel that's like a bear, and then like a green pixel that's like your character.
Exactly. And we thought it was so amazing at the time, right? So look at these graphics, right? But as far as books, I love reading up on musicians and artists that I like.
Biographies?
Biographies, big time, right? And so I read the Slash book and read the Ozzy book, and just a Nicky Six book and all that stuff. So just I read a bunch of those books, right? And so I got them stacked away somewhere.
So if you were wrongfully accused of a crime and you were on death row, you didn't do it, but you're on death row and you get one final death row meal, what is that meal?
Definitely a steak. It's not like I'm a huge red meat eater, but hey, I'm going to eat the most heart clogging, huge cut.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about health too much at that point. I don't think.
Or that, yeah, for sure. A big stack of mashed potatoes. And we'll just skip the vegetables for this one, and then some sautéed mushrooms, in like Worcestershire, and some onion, and then just all the garlic in the world, and with a big giant ass IPA and a glass of wine, red wine with it.
Damn, you went deep with that meal. Any dessert? Are you throwing a dessert in there?
No. No, just
there's no calories. I mean, there's no calories in your final meal. It doesn't matter.
Okay, I guess I like apple crumble.
I guess you don't have a sweet tooth like I do. I just have like a mountain of desserts probably for my final meal. But here's the last rapid fire question. When you find yourself in a rut, what do you do to get out of it as quickly as possible?
Yeah, I've started a little bit of meditating in the last during COVID actually, because I find it's just this kind of cleans the slate a little bit. Um, I forget to do it in times, so there's other methods that I do. It's just about keeping busy. So it's just grab a guitar, or I've always basically got a show to advance or something, or some at this point some kind of accounting to do or something like that, or just everyday duties, cleaning the house and all that stuff. So it's just keeping busy. I think the worst thing is just sitting idle and thinking. Like, you need a little bit of that time. Give yourself a couple minutes just to feel what's going on and think about it. But yeah, it's just about getting busy and getting yourself out of it. Is get that little meditation in, kind of clean slate, and then get busy living. You know.
So we're down to the final three questions. So we're
Yeah.
out of the rapid fire section. These are deeper, more personal questions, so you can answer with however much time you need. Do you have any musical dreams still in your heart that have yet to come to fruition that you're working towards? You've accomplished a lot. Is there still kind of a bucket list?
Yeah, I guess in a way, like, I'm really focusing on, obviously my career is doing sound and TMing at the moment and stuff too. But there's always stuff floating around. Like, there's always riffs, and there's always people that can to work with too, right? Like, I get just buddies in the bands that I actually work with. There's just a big network of people there. So who knows what can happen down the line? It would be quite fun to be in a band playing guitar again. Yeah, sure. I don't know if that's really in the cards for me, if I get that opportunity, if I would go that route. But I'll tell you that just with the amount I play by default, I'd be ready. So if a band I've on the circuit, or an up and coming band or something like that, I need a guitar player. It's the opportunity presented itself. There could be something there. It's not something that I'm actively pursuing. I would say I'm more actively pursuing getting a studio going with my buddy Blair, that we've just started recently, and doing some writing and producing, and that might lead to playing on some recordings. And that's more, I think, where we could go naturally. But definitely, if the right opportunity came by for me to play guitar in a band, and definitely have to think about switching some gears at that point, right? So it's just is what it is, and see what happens.
When you look back on your life and career, what are you most proud of, and what are you most grateful for?
I'm definitely most proud of, I guess, say my skill level. I put in that time, and that it takes to be able to do what I do, and have these bands on this level accept what I do and enjoy what I do. As far as like doing sound, as far as being a guitar player and stuff, I've always kind of just progressed ever so slightly over the years, and a lot more over the last couple of years, but just keeping that alive. So I'm glad I kept that kind of going, and I think being thankful for just opportunity, and that my brain sees those opportunities instead of being afraid of something. Like, honestly, when I started TMing, I was like quite nervous, because it's a lot of responsibility on something that I didn't do a lot of before I started TMing. It's basically just shop management at a production company, or operations management, hiring guys, and doing some little bit of travel arrangements and schedules. So it's all the same thing, but it's just now you're direct in with artists that's been on the circuit for 20, 30, 40 years. It's a lot of pressure. So I'm very thankful for those opportunities, and that my brain didn't make me run from.
And final question here. What advice, if you could go back in time and you could sit down next to your 10-year-old self, if you could take the lifetime you've had of mentorship and lessons and training and experience and ups and downs, what advice do you give cute little Dan sitting there to help him progress through his life?
It's a hard one to kind of answer. I'm just trying to think here.
You don't want to mess with the space-time continuum, but you know what I'm saying.
I know, right? Honestly, what's kind of, because I really haven't thought about this much, but like, learn learn how to say no. I know it sounds really weird, but there's some things over the years where, even though I look at it as, my whole journey as that being a part of it and getting me where I was, but there was some times that I know that I just said yes because I just thought I should, and that it was just I had to pay my dues. Where look back now, and it's just like you didn't have to say yes to everything, and it can maybe change my course to get me to somewhere where I want to be, even maybe a little bit sooner. Because quite honestly, like I didn't start touring with bands till like and get it to that level till I was in my 30s, right? So maybe being a little bit wiser with my a few decisions, and maybe back then maybe I would have got into a little bit sooner, and maybe not even doing stuff for festivals and arenas with great bands, maybe doing stuff on stadiums for ginormous bands, right? Or just maybe it would have got back into playing guitar in a band, right? Because when those opportunities arose, and been at a different level, right? But regardless, I'm very content with where my life is at on a personal and professional level. So, it's not like I go back and be like, you have to do this, right? It'd be like, if you want things to be a little different, maybe a little quicker, you're gonna have to try it. Learn how to say no. A couple of things, being a little wiser with your decisions and who you work with and for.
Yeah, learning to say no to the things you don't want to do allows you to say yes to the things you do want to do.
That's it. That's it in a nutshell, right there. Yeah.
So for our listeners, if where can they find you online if they want to reach out and say, hey, I enjoyed the interview, it was educational for me with what goes on with the live sound industry? If they want to say hi, if they want to stay in touch, where would you send them? Facebook, Instagram, anywhere?
Probably Instagram's the best for that, right? Because that's Facebook I use for a little bit of business, but more personal stuff too. Instagram is for the most part anyway. It's a lot of like business stuff. So it's like a post about the shows I'm doing, the travel and all that, and you're gonna get the odd picture of my Rottweiler and stuff for sure. But but just that whole thing, and through those messages, it's where I try to be a little more.
So they search Dan Preston. Do you know the specific at?
It's Dano underscore da, so DA underscore Mano. So it's Dano de Mano with the underscores in between all that.
I like it. That might be the best Instagram handle that we've had. So
Thornley, yeah, he nicknamed me Dano de Mano.
There you go. So as we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you for your lifelong pursuit of mastery as a guitarist, as a live sound technician, as a tour manager. I want to acknowledge you for elevating the concert experience for us music lovers. So when we go see a show, things are organized, they look great, they sound great. And I want to thank you on behalf of our listeners for helping to educate, the general population as to all the different facets of the live event industry and live sound. So they understand what's going on and all the professionals it takes and all the hard work behind just showing up, and everything is perfect at a concert. So thank you for all those things. And thank you for sitting down for the last, 2.5 hours and letting me pick your brain as a fan of music and a fan of audio.
No problem, Joel. I really appreciate you having me on. It's I love what you're doing. This is bringing a lot of light to the inside of the industry from a musician's point, now from a technician's point, and just in my path from in between both of those things. And it's been a lot of fun, and I hope to do it again. I haven't done this very much. I think I did one once before, but it wasn't as deep as this, right? Like right into what I'm doing. So I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun, man.
You're very welcome. So to our listeners, to our Dan Preston fans, to our Clarknova fans, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Sounds good, buddy. Take care.
If you've enjoyed today's episode of the podcast, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. What I want to know is, who would you like me to sit down with next for a 2-hour deep dive interview? You can let me know by reaching out to me on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Joel Martin Mastery. Joel is Joel. And you can find me on Twitter and Snapchat at Joel Mastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.